Anybody hear me out there? Am I on? It says I'm live. I'm not seeing it. Oh, wait, now I see it. Okay. Is anyone out there? It says there's 24 people watching. I don't see any comments on the chat, though. Oh, there we go. All right. Thank you, Rich. Just trying to figure out if this was working or not. Okay. So this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And I'm here post-Twitter, I guess you could say. Is everything working all right? The audio, you hear me all right? Okay. Because, you know, I only usually used to do these things every time I got 1,000 subscribers. But now I might start to do them more often, because I guess serious fans of a channel tend to like live streams a lot. So there's one thing I've learned all through this, and that's that the thing that matters the most is actually your own fans, right? Your subscribers. Those are the people that I want to focus on. I think I got a bit more focused than I should have been on the larger issue of the OSR. And I mean, it's not unimportant, right? But it isn't actually what should be my first priority, you know? And when everything that went down, there was a lot of people who are, you know, my fellow designers or my influencers that have a variety of different perspectives, let's say, and some of them behaved much better than others as far as everything went down. But the people that really came through are you guys, you know, my fans. And so I'm very grateful to that. So in the future, my plan now, my intention now is to try to be more focused specifically on my subscribers, the people who buy my books, and do more stuff for your benefit. So anyways, while we're waiting, there might be a few more people showing up. So I'm going to start by telling you a little story that has nothing to do with absolutely anything else, but I just have to share this because I just, maybe you guys knew about this, but I didn't. And it's taken me by surprise. It was a total shock when I discovered it. Okay. I have started watching this show that I had no idea existed. It only lasted one season. And let me know if you've ever heard about it, right? So this is a show that was called Barbary Coast. If you've heard about it, then you know where this is going. So Barbary Coast was a series that came out around 1974, 1975. And it was, by all accounts, an absolute disaster, right? It's the kind of thing like, you know, it's horrible, but it's so bad that it becomes watchable based on how bad it is. And the part that gets really interesting is that this show starred Doug McClure, who was coming out at that point of a long-running series called The Virginian, a very successful Western. And he was this classic kind of pretty boy, tough guy actor. And that Doug McClure was one of the inspirations for the character of Troy McClure in The Simpsons, right? So you might not recognize Doug McClure as an actor because he kind of faded away by the late 70s. But if you've ever watched, you know, hello, this is Doug McClure, right? That guy from The Simpsons. That's one of the guys. Doug McClure was one of the guys that inspired him. And then the other person that starred in this show was William Shatner. Okay, this was Shatner right about in the midpoint between when Star Trek, the original series, was canceled and when they started talking about doing a new Star Trek, right? And this show, Barbary Coast, it stars the two of them. It's ostensibly a Western, but a really kind of weird one because it's set in San Francisco and in an area, a strip of San Francisco called Barbary Coast, which is where all the brothels and the casinos and the bars were. And you have Doug McClure as the owner of a kind of fancy bar and casino. And William Shatner is playing a government agent who saved Doug McClure's life at one point. And now he's kind of forced him to help William Shatner in dealing with all kinds of criminal cases that pop up in San Francisco in sometime in the second half of the 19th century, right? And now this is all right away. You can see that this premise is quite a deal, right? But then on top of that, William Shatner in the show is a master of disguise. All right. So I haven't seen the whole series yet, right? But I've seen, among other things, William Shatner dressed up in full makeup, accent, as a Chinaman, to use that nowadays very inappropriate term, but that was the term that they used, right? As I think he did some kind of a Mexican. He portrayed a gypsy fortune teller. And then tons of him dressing up as like old bums and things like that, right? Or rich people or a colonel or a Serbian ambassador and stuff like that, right? But it's just, the show is so unbelievably, like you can see why it's immediately obvious why it got canceled in just 1 year and why after that basically Doug McClure never really worked again. So it's just really funny. So I wanted to tell you guys about this. If you've never heard of this, if you're like, because I mean I'm a fairly big Star Trek. I'm not a huge Trekkie, but I mean, I've seen every Star Trek series from the original series to Deep Space Nine, right? And I watched all the original cast movies and the first 3, I guess, of the Next Generation movies. And I tried to watch the remake that was done in, 2009 or whatever, right? And, I knew that Shatner had played, TJ Hooker, for example, right? But I had never heard of this show. So when I looked at it, I was like, wait, what? It has William Shatner in it? I said, well, let's take a look, right? I'm like, how could a show with William Shatner have been canceled after only 1 season? Well, I know why. So anyways, I just wanted to tell you guys that anecdote as a way to buy some time while the late stragglers came in. And now we're going to get onto the main story here as soon as I grab myself a pipe. So, I mean, I guess some of you guys have not heard maybe about what happened in Twitter, but I don't want this entire live stream to be about that. I'd rather actually get into talking about certain other ideas. And actually, what I want to do more than anything, and one of the reasons I made this a live stream and not a video, is that I want to hear from you about, what you think about some possible ideas I have in mind. Before anything else, I should say yesterday would have been when we would have done inappropriate characters. And those of you who follow inappropriate characters know that about a month ago, Joe Bittman said he was stepping down from inappropriate characters because he just has a lot of personal stuff going on in his life. And we kind of started looking for someone to replace him with, and we replaced him with Diversity and Dragons. But then the past week happened, and Diversity and Dragons decided to bow out of inappropriate characters. I saw that when he said that he was no longer going to host it, some people jumped to the assumption that me or Venger kicked him out or something. That's not true. He wanted to go, and it wasn't anything to do with our decision. If it was up to us, I think both Venger and I would have kept him on for sure. Like we had no problem with him. But I guess, Diversity decided that the situation was too hot for him, which followed up with, and I see that Diversity, I see that you're here, at least you were here. I hope you're still here after the Barbary Coast story. But it's ironic because right after saying that he doesn't want the controversy of being on there, he picks a fight with Daniel Fox and what's her name, Chesh, from but I guess that's okay because they're SJWs, right? But arguing with the Bro SR is a step too far because they're right wing or whatever. But anyways, I mean, if he wants to explain more, he can, and I'm very welcome to have him give his side of the story about the thing. But I mean, I don't want to imply that there's any bad blood between us. I mean, Venger and I both, like I said, if he still wanted to do it now, we would still do it. If not, we're going to work on finding another host, and I don't know when that'll be, but it might take another 4 weeks or so. But yeah, it's not. We have nothing against him. I've recommended his video since then. His video on Daniel Fox is hilarious. Actually, it's quite good. So it's recommended. So that's why there was no inappropriate characters last night. If I'm glancing over this way, it's because I'm looking at the live chat. I had to put my camera in a particular angle, and the live chat is on the other side here. Cursive Yig said diversity in Dragons is fun to watch. Yes, he is, and I strongly recommend him to everyone to subscribe to his channel. And again, if diversity decides later on that he changes his mind again, I'm betting you that we would be happy to have him. Okay. So yeah. Got some tobacco coming through there. So for those of you that don't know, I don't want to make this too long a story, right? But there was some controversy that happened recently in the OSR because, basically there's this group called the Bro SR, who are not part of the OSR. They're an anti-OSR group. The OSR is a design school of creating new products, including games, adventures, etc., based on old school rules. The Bro SR believe as a central element of their entire philosophy that you shouldn't play any games other than AD&D rules as written, they're someone who will actively tell people not to buy OSR products, and yet they're being interviewed by people in the OSR as though they were a part of it, and they're not. They're enemies of the OSR by definition. And that in itself would be, an annoyance. But the fact that, they've also been kind of infested with very far right politics, including a lot of rabid anti-Semitism. Not just Jeffro, the guy in charge, but a lot of the people that are in the Bro SR. Maybe they joined because of that. In fact, because that's the problem when you make room for that sort of what I call race communism. Then you end up having people that aren't really all that interested in the thing, right? Like if it was a knitting circle, but suddenly somebody finds out that at the knitting circle, it's okay to say bad things about Jewish people. You're going to have a bunch of people who aren't all that into knitting, but are going to join just to have an open forum where they can talk about, bad things about Jewish people. So, that this was a problem, and I was having some fights with them. And the basic expert decided he was going to interview Jeffro Johnson, the head of the OSR, the Bro SR, and he said though that he was in. I asked him, well, are you going to ask about the anti-Semitism? He said, oh no, we only want to talk about gaming here. And so I said, well, I think that you're doing a disservice to your viewers because you're going to let Jeffro talk about his ideas about AD&D and how great it is and whatever, but you're not going to tell your audience that he also, the Bro SR people are also a gang of anti-Semites, right? You would think somebody considering, well, should I look more into this, would kind of want to be informed of that detail, And he then accused me of attacking him and wanting to damage his brand, the Basic Experts brand. And I was very confused by that very term, but I'll get more into that maybe in a little bit. So Yeah. All right. I'm looking at the comments here. Deum Servio says anti-Semitism isn't right-wing. Well, no, it isn't. I mean, there's tons of left-wing anti-Semitism too, but these guys happen to also be very, hard right kind of nationalist right. A lot of them. Some of them are like these extreme, ultramontane Christians, or these guys that are into what I call performative Eastern Orthodoxy, and that they're not actually like Eastern Orthodox, or they weren't, but they've converted into it because it's like cosplay, right? You see, that's not just something that happens with Eastern Orthodoxy. Like you see a lot of Westerners that start wearing saris because they get into Hinduism or something, So yeah, anyways, the point is that I got into a big spat with the basic expert, and of course, then the Bro SR started brigading me on Twitter. And it involved an awful lot of people with the smaller Bro SR accounts on Twitter coming onto my feeds and either saying awful things about Jewish people or trying to convince me that actually they're right about Jewish people or something like that, And I wasn't buying any of it. And in the end, it was starting to become such a harassment element of, like this, that they weren't there to really debate me. They were there to troll, right? So I just started blocking them. And this one guy called B-Dubs, who's kind of one of the somewhat better known guys, he has a bigger Twitter account than most of them, then took advantage of that to post saying, oh, the RPG Pundit's all about free speech, but look at this, he's blocking people, And so I then said some harsh words. I suggested that he was a Yahtzee and certain female body part, and then I said, and sorry, you guys aren't worth bothering with. You get the Bro SR get the hammer, right? And what I meant for that was, I had just been. This was in a thread where I'd been blocking everybody who was posting there, and then this guy starts trying to make this argument in bad faith that I'm somehow anti free speech because I am personally blocking people, right? And so what I was referring to there was, of course, the ban hammer, right? Because I also said there on the RPG site, people are going to get blocked, right? Like at the same time, after I posted that, I put on the RPG site a post saying that, if you come in and start espousing the Bro SR, you'll just be automatically blocked on the RPG site, right? So, that was what I posted, and contextually, it never occurred to me that it would be seen as anything else as talking about, dropping the hammer as in the ban hammer, right? Because it was a thread about me blocking people, and I blocked him immediately after, and so on. But these guys, I guess, mass reported it, and next thing I know, I've been, permanently banned from Twitter, and I'm allowed to appeal, but I can tell you guys I did one appeal already, and it was almost immediately denied. So I'm going to try again, but there's a very good chance that I might not be able to get back on. Now, I have been asking people to on Twitter to post, and by the way, I also asked people in my post when I announced this live stream to share the link on Twitter. And I know that at least one or two people did. And I thank you very much for that, because obviously, not having Twitter, one of the problems is it's, there's people that aren't going to be able to find out about this if they haven't subscribed to me on YouTube. So I would really ask you guys, if you want to help me out, whenever you see that I've posted a new video here, or, if you're a Twitter person, if you're on Twitter, when you see that I post some new video, or when I announce I'm going to do a live stream, share it on Twitter so that people can find out even if I'm absent, right? But anyways, so what I'm planning to do is to make another appeal. I'll try to make a more complete argument, but I'm also going to point out that there's a lot of people on Twitter who have, they how do you call it? They put a mention of @Twitter support and have pointed out that it was, that this was an unfair ban, that it was clearly not meant to be intended as a threat of violence, but as a as a well-known, online reference to banning, and hopefully with that evidence, maybe they'll reconsider it, right? So after this live stream is done, any of you guys who have Twitter accounts, please get on Twitter and say something like, "Hey, at Twitter support, the RPG Pundit has been unfairly given a permanent ban. Please reinstate him. He was using a debate term about banning people, not a threat of violence, and it's a misunderstanding." So yeah, if you guys can do that, I'd be really grateful. Do it when we're, if you like, wait till we're done the live stream, so we don't miss anything or whatever. But yeah, I would really appreciate that. And I guess that's all I need to say about the Twitter issue itself, unless you guys have any further questions related to Twitter. Because what I really want to do now is talk instead about what I plan to do now. Aside from trying to appeal. So let me just take a look here at the live chat for a second and see if there's anything else that we need to talk about. Rich S says, was this disco singing Shatner? I believe this was probably before disco, because this was like around 1974. Disco doesn't really hit it really big until 76 or so. Yeah, that for those of you who have arrived later, I was telling people about a series called Barbary Coast. Look it up. The 70s animated Star Trek was worth watching. Yes, it was. Yeah, I watched some of that when I was a kid. What else are we here? Good evening, everyone. Three live streams. People want to. Okay, I guess I'm competing with other live streams. Thank you for all of you who decided to come to my live stream. I don't do them all that often, though I'm probably going to be doing them more often now. The Jim says, I could understand if the Bro SR was a group of gaming originalists, not my thing, but to each their own. But once you start tying on the other garbage, you lose me. Yeah, well, they're not even originalists, because they believe in Jeffro's particular interpretation of AD&D first edition rules as written, which is not really what Gygax meant for it to be. And they also, they talk about it as if it was the perfect, the ideal and perfect version of D&D, and invoke Gygax's genius in that, except, whenever anyone has told them, I mean, the guy that did Secrets of Blackmoor, Griff Morgan, he pointed out to them, I've spoken to all the people who played with Gygax in that era, and all of them said that he never did this. He didn't play full rules as written. He didn't use one time, not in the way that Jeffro meant, and not even in the way that he meant in the book, right? He wasn't a stickler about it, even in his way, right? Which is completely a different understanding than what Jeffro was arguing, right? So what these guys are is fantasists. They've created a fake version of an ideal D&D that is nothing to do with what happened in the old school, but they pretend that they're old school, Comic Gladiator says, I don't even know who the Barossar were, but it's right out of the SJW playbook. Yeah, well, trying to call me an SJW, it's not going to work, dude. I've been fighting the woke crowd since before they were called woke or SJW. There's nothing. Oh, excuse me. My cat is trying to get into something. No, you are not allowed. Get out of here. Sorry, she was trying to meatball. Here, just for that, I'm going to do a horse severance, Meatball. You're in the naughty spot right now. Okay, there you go, Meatball. Meatball is trying to sit on my router because it's warm. It's winter down here, right? But every time she does that, she disconnects my internet connection, and so that would be bad for the live stream. Anyway, sorry. It's not going to work to call me an SJW because I've been fighting them longer than anybody. I've been fighting them since the story gaming, since before there was the story gaming, since it was called The Forge and GNS Theory, and I've been fighting them on RPGNet longer than almost anyone. So it's not going to affect me if you try to accuse me of that, right? And then you said, Comic Gladiator says, and argue what you can prove, i.e. what's been said and by whom. Well, I did that on Twitter. I showed the tweets. I showed the screenshots of Jeffro talking about a cabal of Jews that are trying to destroy our civilization, and stuff like that, So like, I'm not sure if Comic Gladiator here is arguing because, obviously there are a lot of gamers, especially in the OSR, who are anti-woke and who have seen people. I mean, there's tons of woke guys who've accused me of racism, right? It's really confusing for them, right? Like Daniel Fox just did a gloating tweet about me being banned, but he had to very carefully edit out the fact that I was banned for arguing with, racists, with right-wing racists, because that wouldn't be the brand he wants to push, right? So, I'm not sure if you're saying this because you really don't know the context and because that people get falsely accused of stuff. This wasn't a false accusation. There was literal screenshots and I'm sure some people have kept them, even though right now my account has been shut down, so those won't be seen in my Twitter feed. Yeah, anyway. And somebody here mentioned something about Soros. This was not like that. Jeffro wasn't being critical of George Soros or, the Rothschilds or, anybody like that. He wasn't saying, I don't like Jerry Seinfeld, right? He was saying, he wasn't saying I have political differences with the state of Israel, right? All of those are things you can say and not be an anti-Semite, right? You're criticizing individual actions of individual people or of a state organization or, a government. There are some people that do try to claim that, if you say anything about George Soros, you're an anti-Semite. That's not true. Right. There's definitely a lot you can criticize about George Soros. Right. But he wasn't doing that. He was talking about the cabal of the Jews who are doing this and that. Right. And that they're responsible for gay pride or something like stuff like that. Right. And he was assigning a complete and collective guilt. Anyway. Let's see what else we've got here in the live chat, because I really like, one of the things I like about live streaming, even though it's sometimes a bit stressful to me because I'm not very good at the technical stuff, is getting to interact with you guys. Mm-hmm. So, Fooker Springs says, thanks for explaining the whole situation. Wasn't paying attention to Twitter enough to know most of that information. All right, thank you. Rich S says, never argue with an idiot. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. Mark Twain. Well, Brother Twain was very right. And, my error was trying to, but I mean, I was trying to not to argue like as in debate with him or them, the Bro SR. I was trying to have a rational argument with the basic expert, but he immediately reacted as though I was doing some kind of an influencer attack on him, and he was saying, well, how, you've got way more subs than me, so you're just trying to take me down or something like that. And like, that was very, very frustrating because, well, I'll talk more about that later because I think it's a symptom of a bigger problem. But, with the Bro SR, I was mostly just trying to point out every time they were trying to act as though they are part of the OSR and not against it, or that they were trying to act like they're, just regular gamers. I wanted to make sure that the person they were talking to was aware of what they really are, So let's see here. Diversity and Dragon says, Pundit Man, you're getting twice the viewers that inappropriate characters get. You should just host inappropriate characters here. Yeah, the problem is I don't have any technical skills, Double D. That's why we needed you. You're the tech guy. I wouldn't know how to do that. And I'm very smart at some things, and I'm completely incompetent at others. And luckily, I usually have enough wisdom to know which is which, right? And I'll fully acknowledge the stuff that I don't know anything about, and you should never make me the treasurer of any organization, not because I'd steal, but because I would get the adding all wrong, but, if you want me to do a 5-hour lecture on, the origins of Enlightenment philosophy in the 17th century, I could totally do that, and it would be like a walk in the park for me, but you asked me to set up a live, to use StreamYard or some shit. I was a latecomer to Twitter, by the way. I didn't join Twitter until like 2015, I think. And one of the reasons was I just couldn't be bothered to learn how to use Twitter, and that's Twitter. It's not hard to use, right? But I'm just not good at that stuff. And Venger's as bad or worse, I think, because I don't know if it's because he's technologically inept like I am, or if he's just too high, but it's something. That's all I can tell you. So let's see here. Dave Dedman says, what struck me about the entire furore is the infuriating refusal of Broasar cultists to even acknowledge the receipts. Yeah, that's true. But I mean, that's also interesting because none of them were denying it. And several of them, like I said, came onto my threads. Or if you look at the thread that the basic expert did on Twitter, where he was complaining about me, these guys all came in when I started debating him on that Twitter thread. And a bunch of them were saying, yeah, they weren't saying we didn't do it. They were saying, oh, Pundit, you don't understand what the Jews are really like, like this horrible idea, it's just unbelievable. All right, Meatball isn't grumpy anymore. She's sitting on a stack of my books, which will only be a problem if I want to use a book as a visual aid here, but I don't know how much I'll do that. Papa Bear says, what do you think of the YouTube channel Unscripted and Unchained? Well, I think I'm subbed to it. I'm going to be honest that it's not one that I watch super frequently, but yeah, okay, yeah, that's DM Bloodworth, yeah. So I've seen some of his. I can't say I watch all of his videos, but I've seen some of his videos, and I don't think it's awful or anything. I don't have a very strong opinion about it. It isn't one of the. Recently there were a whole bunch of relatively new channels, relatively speaking, that really caught my eye and that I was really impressed with. Before this, I'd watched kind of Aaron the Pedantic at his peak a few times, Dolly Pop. I watch Venger videos once in a while, not all of them by any means, but once in a while when I need to say, okay, what the hell is he talking about now? I might need to know this because I might have to try to defend him for someone, so then I'll take a look, right? I watched Grim Jim videos, even though we have very serious ideological differences, but he's quite good. Apart from the fact that he talks too slow and has that deadpan voice, but so his videos often have good content and are topical. But now I started watching a whole bunch of these guys, these new guys that have been coming up, right? So Diversity and Dragons, was one of the first ones that caught my eye, the Basic Expert, and again, in spite of all of my disagreement with the Basic Expert, I'm still going to say that I still like his channel. I like the videos he puts out. He puts out good videos. I'm not telling people to unsubscribe. On the contrary, you may want to check out that channel because he does make a good channel. He made a bad choice, in my opinion, but he makes a good channel. And then, Black Lodge Games, I like them quite a lot. I know that they're very controversial and have this kind of over-the-top attitude of if you don't engage in the kind of role-playing we do, then you're an abomination or something like that, But I mean, I don't know. It reminds me a little of me in some respects, not about the role-playing aspect of it, but yeah, I like them. And obviously the Red Room have been around a bit longer than a lot of those, and at least I've been on my radar longer than a lot of those, and they do some good stuff too. So there's a lot of really neat channels out there, and I don't often have a lot of time because I mean, like right now I'm busy trying to get Baptism of Fire done so I can go to my publisher, so then my publisher can sit on it for 10.5 months or whatever before they actually release it, and the sooner I do that, the sooner you guys get Baptism of Fire, right? So I can't be watching all kinds of YouTube videos all the time, right? Plus, who would watch Barbary Coast if I watched YouTube videos all the time? Anyway, let's see here. What else have we got? All right, Comic Gladiator. I'm going to be fair and say what you responded. He said, I didn't call you an SJW. I said, don't use their emotion-driven tactics. Well, it's not a question of emotion-driven tactics. It's just a statement of fact, right? If someone talks about a secret cabal of Jews trying to homosexualize society or something like that, then that's anti-Semitism. I'm just calling a spade a spade. I'm saying what it is, okay? And he says, I'm specifically referencing you suggesting people join BroSR because of their racism. Beware the painting with a large paintbrush. Well, there have been other places and other communities where that sort of thing has happened. Not just specifically with, racists, but with other stuff too, right? Like think about furry fandom, right? Like furries, their name is that, they're right at the very bottom of the nerd hierarchy today as a bunch of, freaks and perverts. But if you go back to like the early 80s, mid 80s, what was called furry fandom then was largely about making comic books with anthropomorphic human characters, stuff like Albedo and TMNT, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Usagi Yojimbo, right? Those sorts of comics. And they didn't have any real like kinky context to it at all, right? Until this one big furry fandom convention that happened, I think in San Francisco. I know it might have been LA, somewhere in California for sure, right? And they kind of gave this impression that they would be welcoming of everyone, right? And so suddenly you had these people that were like basically kink pet play people that came along and decided fursuits were cool and then started wearing diapers in public and stuff like that. And suddenly, within like a year, the entire hobby had collapsed into a place that perverts went to for the perversion and had no interest in what it had originally been about, right? And there have been lots of cases where you get, because also, white supremacists, real white supremacists. I'm not talking about people, who accuse, I don't know, Ben Shapiro of being a white supremacist or something like that, or Justice Thomas, of being a white supremacist. I'm talking about like the actual guys, the ones with the Confederate flags and all that sort of stuff, right? The ones with the other kind of flags too that I can't really say the word on YouTube at risk of being demonetized. Those guys, a lot of times go out of their way. The punk movement, right? Like they infiltrated the punk movement with the intention of changing punk from being about a type of music to being about their politics, right? It's exactly the same thing SJWs do. It's entryism, right? So how can you believe in SJW entryism in the OSR, which is real, right? I hope you'll agree it's real. But imagine that you couldn't possibly have racial nationalist, anti-Semitic entryism into the OSR, right? Like, I mean, it's it's just as possible, right? All right. Anyway, I really don't want to turn this into a live stream where I just debate about the BroSR, because I've been doing that for quite a while, and I don't really want to keep going with it. Travis Fowler says, Jeffro is horrible in that interview. Diversity and Dragons showed that in his video. He sounded like an idiot and very uninformed on the subject his cult claims to have knowledge on. Diversity and Dragons did do a very good job of that. I didn't like his sketch that much at the beginning because I also thought he was just going to play light on it, right, without actually getting into the depth of, the real scumminess. But then he did. And so, I said at the time when I saw the little sketch, I said lame, right? Because I thought I put on the chat lame because I thought that was going to be it, and that it was not really, to me, it wasn't hard hitting enough. But then he did get hard hitting in a very clever way of basically humiliating Jeffro for what he did say, which is to say, yeah, his ideas about gaming are stupid. And by the way, he can't make a campaign that lasts more than 6 months or so, right? Like, so that's a failure. If you've got a theory of gaming and your theory doesn't actually produce either a good game or a good campaign or whatever, then you're just a wanker, right? And that's basically what they are. So yes, it was good. But the thing is, at the time, when you were looking at the basic expert, it really was not, it wasn't that evidenced, right? Like there were a whole bunch of fanboys on the chat there, because I was there, I was listening in, I didn't say anything because I didn't really want to start a war with the basic expert at that moment, right? And because I thought, the basic expert basically threatened, he put a post on the live chat saying, don't even bother trying to talk about, anything that is political. Okay, so whatever. But anyway, it looked at that time like, I mean, the the host and the co-hosts were basically just giving him an infomercial, with the exception of the co-host, whose name escapes me now, this the European guy. He did at least make fun of their campaigns of saying, oh yeah, you guys are talking all about being, this kind of Conan and Appendix N stuff, but then you have like all of your characters have these stupid names, right? Like Macho Gandalf and stuff like that, right? So like, he was mocking them for that, and that was the closest they got to any criticism whatsoever of the BroSR. All right. What else have we got here? Retro Roy says, I love the scarf and the jacket. It looks fly. No joy. No joke. Thank you. By the way, some people are saying, oh, like, that this is like a costume or something. It's not a costume. This is like what I normally wear, right? You got to remember, it's winter here. And in South America, it doesn't get super cold. It never gets below 0, right? And actually right now it's not bad at all. It's comfortable enough. I don't even have any heating on, but houses here, because it's never super cold, don't have insulation really. Like they're brick houses for the most part. They don't have any insulation. So people will, unless you've got some kind of ultra modern house or live in some of the newer apartments that might have, central heating, you generally bundle up, and then you have things like electric heaters or gas heaters, right? But you tend to wear a jacket indoors, right? So I'm not doing this because it's an act. This is how I normally dress, and in this country, people tend to want to dress well, and especially if you're kind of in the middle class and up, so there you are. And I've always liked that about living in Uruguay, I know it's a bit different from the typical nerd of the habit of t-shirts with logos on them. I don't own a single t-shirt with a logo. I do own a couple of t-shirts, but I basically use them to sleep in bed at night with. I don't go anywhere wearing a t-shirt. But thank you for liking it. And I quite like this jacket, especially because of this. That's super useful. I've worn out too many jackets otherwise. All right. Carrying on here. Critical Role sucks, says Retro Roy. There, I said it. As if this was like some kind of really profound statement, Retro. But all right, we're glad you got that out. Okay, well done, Retro Roy. Kevin DeJordy says, how long do you think Wizards takes to realize that tabletop RPGs aren't video games and will never be video games and can't be monetized like video games? Well, I guess most of you guys, because again, there's a live stream, so probably most of you are my fans, have watched my last video before the Twitter apocalypse, which was about how apparently now in the Wizards shop, they're no longer selling print-only books, right? You can end up getting like the print and PDF still, right? But I mean, I think that there's a very, very good chance that they're moving towards a world where they're going to be focused totally on the VTT. And so future books you're going to have the 3 core books. They're going to put those core books out for sale, in bookstores. Yeah, they'll publish those, right? But then everything else, including the 3 core books, but then all the other stuff, instead of like these books like, what is it? The Wild Beyond the Witchlight or the Radiant Citadel or Strixhaven, all of those are going to stop. And instead what you're going to have is source material adventures and source books that are going to be digital and specifically for the VTT, which are going to be very different because there are, being a virtual tabletop means the whole focus changes. It's not going to be about being a barista, at a magical college and worrying about your prom. It's going to be a dungeon, And so the guys, if I was one of these woke diversity hires, nepotism hires that were living off of Radiant Citadel, as if they could, right? Because I think when you break it down, they probably were all paid like, a couple $100 a piece, because there's like 50 people of them, so you divide all of that. They each wrote like 2.5 pages, right? It's just ridiculous. But anyway, I'd be very worried that I'm going to be out of a job if I was one of these people. Of course, they probably don't really have much to be worried about, because most of them didn't even play D&D until they got hired. They weren't, they were like vegan cookbook authors, right? But they're going to be gone. And that's the good news. The bad news is that Wizards is going to be trying full on to shift the entire hobby into virtual tabletops, and that'll be like all the D&D players. I don't think that'll succeed, but I'm not sure if the thing that'll break them is the D&D fandom, right? I think there are obviously going to be a lot of people that will move to 6e or to the one D&D, and that will end up adopting the virtual tabletop. And one of the things that the virtual tabletop has is that once you subscribe and once you're in there, there's a vested interest in not getting out, because as soon as you start playing and you build up your campaigns and you buy the books and you get the skins and you pay the microtransactions, it's sunken costs, right? Every single thing you end up spending money or time on means that you have a higher vested interest in staying hooked on it, right? Rather than going and playing other stuff. So it could be very tricky in that sense from the point of view of gaming. But I think the real problem is I'm not convinced that what the experience that they can create is going to be close enough to tabletop RPGs to really fulfill that itch, or as good as video games, right? So like their real competition as a virtual tabletop is going to be video games. Like if there are better video games than hanging around the virtual tabletop, why are you going to do the virtual tabletop, when you've already tried to turn D&D into what is essentially a kind of video game, removing the RPG aspect of it and turning it into the virtual tabletop means that suddenly you've destroyed the one thing that makes it different from a video game. And when you compare it to a video game, it's going to be lesser than a video game, right? So yeah, I mean, video games will probably have better stories for starters than whatever stories they make up for, in the VTT. But that's the way they've got to go, because Cynthia Williams promised that D&D was going to make $1 billion, and there's no way they're going to make $1 billion from books. It's that simple. Calvin only says Pundit has Latinx preferences. Latinx isn't the word, dude. Parasangvi says Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck are furries. Well, in the original furry fandom, what was it? The Donald Duck comic books were a huge influence on that, right? Because I don't know if you know this, but they were like there was a series of Donald Duck comics that were written. I think it was in the European market. I don't know, but I mean, I've looked at some of them, and they were like really sophisticated stories, actually, right? And then so that was one of the things that was a kind of an inspiration for early furry fandom comic, for comic designers doing these stories with anthropomorphic characters. They were good stories, while still being, Donald Duck stories. I'm trying desperately to catch up here, so I'm going to probably skip ahead a few things that I might otherwise have talked about. Retro Roy says, if you were ever to visit the United States, well, I haven't just visited the United States many, many times, but I've lived there a couple of times. So where would you want to go? Well, the funny thing is, in these last couple of years, my answer to that would be completely different than what it would have been a few years earlier, So, yeah. I guess I would probably want to go to Florida, first of all. I've got friends in Florida. I have friends from here that have gone there. I've got friends that were from elsewhere in the United States that have gone there. And, you know, I've been to Florida once in the past, and it wasn't Miami, but I had a pretty bad experience of it, you know. But now it really looks like it's you know, it's really the model state, isn't it? I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's the best place to live in the United States if you had to live somewhere in the United States today, right? Anyway, so yeah, probably Florida. I might like Tennessee too, you know. Hey, Black Lodge Games is here. Hey guys, I was just telling people that your channel is good. Osiris says, "Hey Pundit, what is your magic system like? Do you mean in my games?" I'm not sure if you're meaning in games or real life, you know. But I guess the answers for both is in the Invisible College, you know. So I guess if you've never bought one of my books, Osiris, my magic system is not Vancian in any way, and it's pretty much the same in all of my games. It's not the same magic, but it's the same system in all of my games, same mechanic, which is that it's based on the casting of rituals, where you're doing a D20 roll against a difficulty number, and there are usually different scales of success that can have different levels of success. It's obviously very inspired by Dungeon Crawl Classics, right? Usually without like the fumble roll or some of that other stuff that's a bit more gonzo than most of my games are. But yeah, I really love that concept of the spell roll as being the way to resolve a mechanic, you know, for Magic. So that's one thing. And then second, in all of my books, the magic that I use tries to be reflective of what people in the culture that the setting is based on really understood or believed magic to be like. Okay, so in Lion and Dragon, the magic is based on actual medieval people's ideas of how magic worked and what you did with magic and what type of rituals of magic there were, right? And it's the same thing in all of my other books. So let me see. Crap Phone says, RPGPundit forgot the most important part of their new digital model. It'll be subscription-based for sure, reoccurring revenue, every monopolist dream. Yeah, well, I'm just talking about that later. I'm guessing you posted that before I started talking about that. Dave Dedman says, Wizards of the Coast are definitely down for dystopian pod habitats where nobody meets in person and only online gaming is permissible. Well, I'm telling you, sooner or later, somebody who's either in WotC or shilling for WotC is going to say that playing games on a tabletop with other people and not in a VTT is problematic, right? They're going to be saying that, you know, the very act of playing unsupervised without moderation from the virtual tabletop and with a DM that can basically do whatever, you know, the danger of that, you know, there being, I don't know, misogyny or sexism or transphobia or white supremacy in there means that shouldn't really be allowed, you know, like that's coming. It's a question of time before somebody suggests that in a serious way. Keon Cover says, every big company is forced into DEI crap as part of every human resources department. Yeah, well, I don't know if you saw, but just recently a number of the diversity officers of several of these big corporations were all fired at the same time. So some weird shit is happening. I mean, like Larry Fink of BlackRock, he didn't, you know, some people are misreporting this, that some people are saying that he's turned against, you know, ESG and DEI. That's not it. He said he's not going to use those terms anymore. Right? He didn't even suggest that he doesn't actually believe in it, right? But that essentially he thinks that the whole thing has been soured and is now harmful economically to present those terms and use that style, right? Doesn't mean that he doesn't still want to be, you know, an activist, a globalist activist, right? But there you are. But I think that the winds are changing in certain ways, you know, like after what happened to Budweiser and Target and Disney, you know, certain lessons are being learned. Now, that might not be what we want them to learn. It might be just that they're going to try to figure out how to be more sneaky about it, right? Climbing That Mountain says, if you want to play a barista getting ready for prom, Pundit, I'm ready to run that game on Twitch. You'll be bigger than Critical Role. A lot of people, I asked people, I've been doing now, one of the things I've been doing since I don't have time to be on, or the opportunity to be on Twitter really, is I've been doing a community post every day on my channel. So if you're subscribed, you should theoretically see these. If you've hit the notification bell, you should see them every time. And I'm trying to post like interesting subjects, not just ads for my videos or something like that, right? And in one of them, I was asking people what sort of stuff, and this is one of the things I want to ask tonight too, is what sort of content would you like to see me do, right? If I'm going to be doing more content. Another question I want to ask basically is like, how often do you want to see me, right? You'll note that, there are some YouTubers that do like 4 YouTube videos a day. I'm never going to do that, right? But there are also some that do, one YouTube video a day, or that do like a very regular YouTube videos on regular dates. And I haven't done any of those things. What I usually do is post a new video anywhere between 3 to 5 days, more or less, right? But I don't freak out about it if I don't do it. And I don't promise there's going to be a video on such day, right? Or something like that. But like, my question to my subscribers is that, would you rather just keep having that frequency of videos? Like, do you value the videos more for the fact that they're not on every day? Or like, if you had the opportunity to get twice as many videos as I have been doing until now, would you want that, right? Like, would you actually end up wanting to watch them all, And built into that is like, well, what would you want to watch stuff about? And some people have been suggesting me doing live streaming of my games, right? Now, I'm going to note, I hate the idea of live streaming, and because I think, live streaming that is actually people just playing the game is more or less boring to people who aren't playing the game, right? And live streaming of a game for the sake of live streaming, to be a successful live streaming of a game, you have to change it into an improv stage show or a reality show like Critical Role, which is not the game. It's not real, right? It's fake. And so I'm not very keen on doing that. That said, I also have to point out to people that there is a channel, the Bill the Elf channel, which is the channel that was started by the guy that plays Bill the Elf in my Last Sun campaign. He records the audio of every single session we play and puts it on YouTube. And so you've got there a 4-hour block of audio of us playing World of the Last Sun. So if your goal is to see how I DM, check out Bill the Elf's channel. And like, as expected, because it's not us trying to play up to the camera in any way, it's just us playing and him recording us playing. It doesn't get a lot of views, right? Most people not find it that interesting, even though I'd have to say, it's actually one of the most hilarious campaigns I've ever been in, right? Like, where if you listen, there isn't a session where we're not cracking up multiple times in the session, right? Because just, it's a Gonzo world. It's a kind of a particular type of comedy, and we're all very much into it. And, like that's how, that's how it's developed over 11 years now, that it's become so, like, I've never had as much fun in any campaign as the World of the Last Sun, and of course I've had way more serious campaigns, but this is the longest one I've ever had. And it's also the most fun one I've ever had. It's also the funniest one I've ever done. So all three of those things have to connect in some way or another, Okay, let's carry on here. 5e is the Bud Light of RPGs, says the Wanderer. Yeah. Oh, am I caught up? Oh my God, I'm caught up. All right. Marshall Miller says, I've been interested in watching live streams to see certain DMing styles or adventures, but not as a series of anything. Well, if you want to see my DMing style for Gonzo, at least, and my DMing style for other stuff is not that different. I mean, I can talk about and give examples about my DMing style without necessarily filming my campaigns, right? The thing is too that only 2 of my campaigns are in English. Like the other ones are in Spanish, so that might not be all that useful to some of you guys to listen to anyway. Last Sun is in English. Keon Corbett says, you do a little more live streams like this. Yeah, well, I think I might. Yeah, because clearly there is some popularity to that. Now, mind you, I will note here's one of the issues about my live streaming, which is that I have monetization on my channel, right? But I do not have super chats or subscriptions. And I didn't really have time to double check again, but the last time I tried to check it out, because of weirdnesses of Uruguayan law, basically I couldn't get super chats, right? And I'm suspecting that's still the case. So what I'll say to people is, first of all, one of the things I don't like much about super chats is that on a lot of channels, the super chat is set up so if you want the guy doing the live stream to answer your question, you have to put in a super chat. I'd never want to do that. I would rather be able to look and answer everybody on the basis of any question that I find interesting and try to respond to every comment I can, which is what I've done in every one of my live streams, right? So I'm not a big fan of that, right? I am a big fan of people giving me money, obviously, right? Who wouldn't be? So, but what I would say is, okay, if you want to do the equivalent of a super chat, then, go and buy one of my products. Like I've just put out, by the way, because I haven't really had time to announce this with everything that's going on. I haven't just put out. Spectre Press has just put out RPG Pundit Presents number 108, Even Weirder Gonzo Organizations. Okay, so this is another issue of RPG Pundit Presents. It's an issue that what it has is it's not really it's not an adventure book or a source book, but it's a collection of 9 weird fantasy or Gonzo fantasy groups that you can plop into your Gonzo setting, and they're specifically from my World of the Last Sun campaign. They're all groups that existed. They're like groups like the Anti-Work Revolutionary Party, the Lycanthropists, the Macho League, and several others. The Secret Order of the Dark Conspiracy, I think it's called. And there's quite a lot of funny and some of them weird fantasy groups. Now this is all fluff. This book in particular is a fluff book. It doesn't have new rules or stats or an adventure, right? It's just a description of the organization. So it might not be up everybody's alley, but it's if you're looking for some inspiration of 9 groups that you could put into a game, especially if you want to weird up the game, then check it out. It's from Spectre Press. On Drive-Thru RPG, costs $2.99 for the PDF. It's 26 pages long, so it's a pretty good value for $2.99. There are going to be a few other RPG Pundit Presents issues coming out before they've finished the whole run of everything I gave them. That leads me to another point I want to make. But before that, I'll say, if you like RPG Pundit Presents 108, go and buy it, right? If you want to give me some money, just go and buy it, right? If you don't like that, there's tons of other stuff that you can get right now. Unfortunately, I was going to show you the book, but guess who's sitting on all my books right now? There's Meatball, and she's on top of a big pile of all my books. So, but you guys know what my books look like. So, check out Arrows of Indra. At least I can look at the spine here. Cults of Chaos, The Invisible College, Dark Albion, Lion and Dragon, Sword and Caravan, Star Adventurer, the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, The World of the Last Sun, Old School Adventures, Old School Companion number 1 and number 2. Check any of those out, right? And pick something up. Instead of, you can't get me a super chat, well, buy one of my products, either one of my small ones, any of the other 107 RPG Pundit Presents, or one of my big ones, right? Or if you don't want to do that, or because you've got all my books and don't really care about RPG Pundit Presents 108, or you're not, for some reason you're not a role player yet, you are here on this channel, check out my Patreon, and you can do a $5 donation to my Patreon. It does nothing goes on there, but it's set up for people who want to give me support for what I do, for the fight I fight, for the products I make, and everything else, in a place where they can do that without having to buy a book for some reason. I mean, I'd always buy a book if I could buy a book, right? That would be my point of view. But some people want to do this, right? So there you are. Bob the Odd asks, how many pipes do you have? Large collection. Well, I've got, I keep buying pipes and I keep giving away pipes, but I'm pretty sure that right now I have somewhere a little bit shy of 70 pipes. So yeah, it's a big collection. It's not, there are some people have much bigger collections, but most people do not have a collection that big, even most pipe smokers. Yeah, Mogavor says super chats are one question for the price of one of his books. Exactly, right? Like, and I know, I mean, super chats are great if because you're watching the live stream, you're enjoying the live stream. A lot of people will ask a question, but a lot of times they're also just giving money as support, right? That happens with inappropriate characters, right? Where people will give their support because IC can do it because I don't run inappropriate characters, right? It's not my channel. And it's based in the US, so they can do it, right? And so some people just go, here's $5 because we like what you're saying, right? And that's great. That's really, it's a wonderful way for people to support content creators or influencers or whatever you want to call us, right? But, what I don't like is that in some channels, that's the only way that the person doing the videos will interact with you. I don't approve of that. I want to interact with you guys all the time. Eric C. says Invisible College and Sword and Caravan are on my short list of gaming books to get. Well, I don't think you'll be disappointed. Diversity and Dragons says I still need to grab Invisible College. Well, don't wait. Run now to your nearest gaming website and pick up Invisible College. Dim Stereo says, could you set up a company in the USA to get super chats? I don't think so because, like, the thing is, Google knows where I'm recording from, right? So one of the things, for example, like the monetization obliges, even though I don't just my banking isn't just in Uruguay, right? But I have to use a Uruguayan bank to get the money from the monetization of videos, right? So no, I don't think that would work for my channel, and I don't want to try to sneak around the actual rules. Even though some people have had problems with YouTube, I haven't, and I'm quite satisfied so far with the service that they have provided, and I'm quite willing to accept if there's something that because of country restrictions they can't offer me. Okay, fine, right? Rob Necronomicon says, what's next from you as in the next RPG or larger supplement? Well, apart from RPG Pundit Presents 108, probably the next supplement is going to be coming out from Mad Scribe Games, and I believe it's going to be the Book of NPCs for Sword and Caravan. And that's going to be a pretty large source book, and it's going to have biographies of every single historical character mentioned in Sword and Caravan, right? So whether you're talking about like hugely significant guys like Richard III and Saladin and Genghis Khan, or much more obscure characters like Inak Khatun, the wife of the vizier of the Seljuk Turks, right? And it's going to give you like their biography, their stat blocks, important details, gaming details of like timeline. There's going to be there's a timeline in the thing that provides you with like events that could happen depending on where you are, what you could encounter on any given year of like important events going on in the timeline for revolving around these major characters. And it's going to have a couple of other stuff that is like basically fan service because people really liked that I wrote a lot in, or a bit actually, not a lot really, in Sword and Caravan about the Song Dynasty's wondrous inventions, right? That they were an unbelievably advanced civilization, right? And so they had done, they had cannons and they had, gunfire. We were talking about in the 11th century, but they also had like landmines, right? Motherfuckers had landmines. It's unbelievable. And they had, all kinds of other stuff. So I've added some more of the wondrous inventions of the Song Dynasty. And the biggest one and the one that I still rankle a bit about is because everybody who got Sword and Caravan, it seems like we're saying, well, how come there's not an assassin class? Like there's literally the assassins, the original assassins in this time period, right? And like the assassins are there in the monster and foe section as like NPC opponents, right? But the thing is that the nature of the assassins was such a structured and controlled cult that it wouldn't make sense for someone to be a player character assassin. But people kept demanding it. So in this source book, I'm going to have the class. I've created it as a class that could theoretically be used as a player character class. So it's going to be in this book of biographies. That's probably the next supplement, unless they've done it, switched it around. That was the first of the 2 I gave them. There's another supplement coming out after that. So yeah. So that's going to be my next couple of things. But then there's also something I'm kind of fooling around with the possibility of doing that I'm going to mention in just a little bit here. But I'm trying to not forget anything. And I've got the feeling that there's stuff I've already forgotten that I was going to get into talking about. I'll keep looking at some of the questions and maybe it'll come back to me. Papa Bear said, what do you think of Adventure Conqueror King as a system? Well, Adventure Conqueror King is a very good system. It's an early second wave OSR product. It obviously owes a lot to the rule cyclopedia and the rules that it had on dominions and things like that, but also on other stuff, on like the trade rules that I think were probably borrowed from Mistara's, what was it, Minarthad guilds or Darrican? I forget which of the country sections, which of the gazetteers was the merchant country. Yeah, I think it was Darrican, which in turn was borrowed, was heavily inspired by Traveller rules, like from, the science fiction game, so it's a very interesting lineage of stuff that's in there. And of course, Adventure Conqueror King also has some influence of like 3.5 edition D&D. But then it has some weird stuff of its own. I mean, but it's a fine game, and I understand why people like the main appeal of it is the domain level play is quite well set up there, it's all right. What else have we got here? The Dark Mist says, that reminds me I have to write a letter to Fatima Khatun, her husband, about yeah, Inak Khatun and Fatima Khatun are 2 different people, though. I'm guessing that the Dark Mist has to be one of my Sword and Caravan players, because he's referencing something that happened recently in our campaign. That's funny. All right, Mog of War, we'll see you later. So, okay, one of the things that I have now remembered, just another little side argument, before I get back to like my plans, a little side detail about something that I've noticed in the process of this whole Twitter war issue is that, I've been warning people, like, all the way back to when Shadow Dark did its publicity for its Kickstarter. A lot of people misunderstood and misinterpreted me as being against Shadow Dark as the game. I wasn't. I was against the marketing style that it used. Right? I mean, I'm sure Shadow Dark is a very good game. It has to be. It's got a lot of stuff from that I do in Lion and Dragon in it too, right? So, but the marketing style was a marketing that was focused not on design, but on influencers, right? And that was, to me, dangerous. 5th edition, the fandom of 5th edition is entirely controlled by influencers, right? Being a good designer of 5th edition stuff gives you very little clout. Whereas if you're, one of these girls that has only been playing D&D for 4 months, but she's got a YouTube channel and she has 100,000 subscribers because she's kind of hot, she has massive influence over the 5th edition sub-hobby, right? The OSR has always been designer driven, right? So the people who have, let's say, the influence in the OSR in as much as anyone does are the people that actually make games, right? You listen to Jim Raggy, not because he's a hot chick with 100,000 followers. You listen, in fact, he's the opposite of that, right? But you listen to him because he's the guy that did Lamentation of the Flame Princess, right? He's because of his design chops, right? You listen to me for the same reason, and also because I'm a loudmouth, but even so. So the game designers are the ones that did this, right? And we had some people for over time that were doing YouTube channels, but we're not game designers. Because you have game designers with YouTube channels. Grim Jim, me, Venger, heck, even Raggy has a channel. and other people. But we're mainly designers who happen to have YouTube channels, right? And so the YouTube channel is not what defines us, but it's our being game designers that might make people watch our YouTube. And then you had some other people that just weren't game designers, but had YouTube channels and made videos. And some of them were kind of interesting, but they weren't as significant, let's say, as the people who were the game designers. And now we've suddenly had this burst of new YouTube channels that are mainly people, some of them who might have already released a product or two, right? But mainly they're known for having a YouTube channel, and they have growing influence as YouTubers. And you know, this would not necessarily be bad, except that it became very clear to me in this Twitter thing that it creates a different set of priorities. Now, there are some examples that are different. You know, the Red Room started as a YouTube channel. They started making games. They've made games. You know, they've got the second most number of OSR games after me, I think. You know, like they've made so many games in such a short time, and they've become really good at it. And now they're very clearly designers over YouTubers, right? Like their priorities are not about worrying about their YouTube subscribers. It's about worrying about the games that they make, right? Whereas there's other people that might have made one game or might be making a game or something, but their main concern is their YouTube channel. If they're making a game, it's just a way to help monetize the YouTube channel in some cases, right? And this is what struck me when I had this argument with the basic expert. And he was all pissed off because I had more substance than him, not like as if he was jealous, but as if like this meant that I was like trying to push him down and I was trying to damage his brand or something like that, which is like, you know, I didn't even understand the concept of having a brand, right? But this is YouTube influencer talk, right? That's what it is. And it kind of then made me realize what went down, right? Because, you know, obviously, if you have a movement that's trying to enter into the OSR, who are fundamentally anti-OSR, they believe that you shouldn't buy or play games made by the OSR. You should only play AD&D First Edition. Right? Everybody who's a game designer is going to say, screw those guys, right? And everybody who was a game designer more or less did, you know, like with very few exceptions. There's some people who kept quiet, but most of them at least were nominally on my side in this. But the influencers, with, again, one or two notable exceptions, were mostly not on my side in this. And the reason for that, I think, is because if you're a game designer, obviously, if you want the OSR to be a design school, having a whole group of people come in that say we don't want to design anything and we don't want you to design anything, we want you to play D&D, AD&D First Edition rules as written, is going to fundamentally change the hobby, and it's going to be destructive in general to the OSR as a movement, to the OSR as a design school, and it's obviously going to be personally damaging to the careers of the people who are designing games, right? That's a direct issue for them. Whereas if you're a YouTuber and you have a bunch of guys that show up, you have a guy, Jeffro Johnson shows up. Jeffro Johnson, I don't know how many people really are in the Bro SR. I'm guessing that it's more than 12 and less than 50 that are really actually in the Bro SR in any meaningful way, right? But, you know, if you're a YouTuber and that means you're going to get somewhere between 12 and 50 more subs, then all of a sudden that looks appealing to you, right? And if speaking up against the fact that Jeffro Johnson is sharing anti-Semitic tweets or writing them, which he did also, if speaking up about that or even questioning him about that means that he's going to get pissed off at you and he's going to make all of his 12 to 50 people unsubscribe from you, and he's going to get them to say bad things about you and try to get other people to unsubscribe you. He's going to call you an SJW. And so other people who might not realize that you're not an SJW, you know, they might unsubscribe. You might get a lot of unsubscriptions, so you'd better shut up, right? You'd better just talk about one time with him, but not question any of his politics, right? So suddenly there's a completely different priority. And that's my reason why I don't think you should ever want the OSR to be run by influencers rather than designers, because it makes it a completely different thing. And it becomes something where all that'll really matter is what the influencers will most benefit by. That's why you had, when Shadow Dark promoted her game to all these 5e influencers, they did what 5e influencers always do. They made these incredibly positive, glowing reviews of this because they were getting swag and because you can't, in an influencer culture, you're not supposed to make negative reviews, right? I've had people that come out of 5e and look at my reviews and say, oh, you can't say these things. You're not allowed to say anything bad about these products, right? I'm like, what do you mean? That's being critical is a whole part of what you're supposed to do in a review, right? So if you want the OSR fandom to end up looking more like 5e fandom, then what you have to do is put more priority on influencers than on game designers, right? If you want the OSR to keep being about making incredible games that you can enjoy, you need to be wary of putting as much weight on influencers as you do on game designers, right? On like YouTube influencers. So that's my I think probably my final rant of the night, and then I'm gonna talk about more productive things, right? So let me see here. Now I've got a bunch of posts to catch up on again. Right, so John Fraser asked what happened to the inappropriate characters live stream. I explained that at the start of the live stream today. Short story version of it, Fraser, is that Diversity and Dragons backed out of being our third host. It was his decision, not anything that Venger or I did. Osiris says, Pundit, I would like to see some more instruction in the making a setting video. Okay. Well, I can do more stuff like that, more or less. Hopefully different than the one I've already done. One-Legged Frog says, I'd like to hear your method of getting into character for RPing. Well, here's the thing, right? I get some very basic, it's the same thing as when you're being a player, right? You get some very basic info about what an NPC is like, right? Or what the character in question is like. And that first you pretend to be him until if you run him long enough, he starts to be a separate person from you. And then you just let that separate person do the things that it's supposed to do. Right? That's how it works, right? Like it's not about you turning into the person. It's about faking it until that person starts having a life of their own, as like, in Eastern occultism, they call that a tulpa, a thought form, right? It's got a different personality. And so like the moment that you don't even have to think about what it's going to do, it's like it's telling you what it's doing. That's when it's become a living character. Crapbone says something about how you come up with adventures for Lion and Dragon inspiration. Do you have a methodology? Well, most of my adventures for Lion and Dragon are like, you can see the published ones in the Old School Companion 2. About half of those are in some way inspired by real life events or stories of the Middle Ages that I just kind of fill in and adapt a little bit so that it becomes playable as a game, right? And then I'm going to be honest with you, the other half of them are largely based on me using Cults of Chaos and using it the way it's meant to be used, right? Which is to say I generate a villain group from Cult of Chaos, and then I craft the rest of the adventure around that group, right? Sometimes also combining the group with a specific place. So I might say, well, I didn't do an adventure in the city of York yet. So, okay, I'm going to do it in York. I do a bit of research about what's going on in York. I create a villain group using Cults of Chaos. So you can do this too, right? You can make your own villain group. And I mean, like, Cults of Chaos is a book that has a whole random generator where you can generate by a collective set of tables that work off each other, a group of like a villainous sector cult or witch group or demon worship group or stuff like that, who have, and you randomly generate their number, their purpose, who they work with for, what they're doing, what their resources are, what their difficulties are, etc. And so you get a whole, in like 5 minutes of rolling, you end up getting an entire structure with a whole bunch of plot hooks connected to it, right? And so then you just tap that into a place and maybe tap that into some other detail, a historical moment in time, and you have an adventure. And that's how I do it. Let me see here. What else have we got? I think I went back a bit there. Oh yeah, because that's the Adventure Conqueror King question. Dom Servio says Shadow Dark was astroturfed. Yes, to a certain extent it was. Tyler said, have you ever thought about making your own GM's guide? I've heard you talk about how you run games by watching previous videos. I've always dreamed about an RPG Pundit's GM's guide. Well, you know what? I once was commissioned to write a DM's guide for Presses Intermedia, who had published Lords of Olympus. So this is like way, way back in the past. Right? This was before Arrows of Indra, right? It was after Lords of Olympus, before Arrows of Indra. And I wrote that book. And it was like, I don't know, a 50, 60-page book, something like that. And he never published it. It was work for hire, so I wasn't, I didn't need royalties or something like that. It was probably the last work for hire book I ever did. I got paid, right? He paid me, but he just never published it. Actually, I think that's now in Spectre Press's hands now. So they might end up taking segments from that and making that into future RPG Pundit Presents issues, so they don't have to get me to write more of them, because it'll still be me. But that'll be like me circa 2012, and I'm not sure how much of that I'm still like. I'm sure a lot of it still holds up, right? I'm sure a lot of it is still stuff I would say, yeah, that's exactly like I do it now, But some of it probably wouldn't be. I'm sure that some of it some of it might even be cringy. I don't know. But there you go. I did, in fact, write a DMing's book years and years before Venger ever did. What else have we got here? Sapphire Dragon says livelihoods can be touchy subjects. Yes, that's true. They can be. My Name says, wow, I'm subscribed for all notifications, got no notification. This just happened to show up in the regular list. Well, when you do notifications, I don't know, at least on the YouTube app, you should check carefully because it usually has like multiple options of what type of notification you get. So make sure you've got on the right one. And also, I don't know, if you check if it's a channel you go to more often, like there's some channels I'm not even subscribed to, but that I visited a couple of times recently, and then suddenly it's recommending me videos of that channel constantly, right? So you may just want to check it out. Check out my channel, on every couple of days or something. It's first of all, so you don't miss something like this. Also, because like I said, now I'm doing a lot of community posts. I'm doing some shorts too and stuff. I hate for people to miss this. I mean, obviously it's going to stay recorded after, and you can watch it after the fact, but the live stream is fun to be in, right? Dam Servia says you've just nailed the basic expert. Yeah. A lot of people saying that they're surprised to see my face. Well, I've been for quite a few months now just showing my face on videos. So, I mean, if you haven't been in Inappropriate Characters lately, if this is the first time you've seen my face, because I've long since not had anything to lose by it, right? And I don't put my face on my regular videos because I'd rather put my cat or my books. I don't think my face is a particular draw, I mean, it's not James Raggy levels of grotesque, although maybe that is a draw to some people, James Raggy level, shirtless fat guy. It looks like he hasn't bathed or something, but it also, there's nothing about it that is going to make it more, I think, more appealing. Certainly less appealing than looking at Meatball, right? But on the live stream, because of the setup where I want to be able to be next to my desktop computer so I can look at the live chat even as I'm recording on my phone, right? That means that trying to find a place to put a book up becomes very inconvenient, and it means I'm going to be further away from the microphone of the phone. So no, I said screw it. I'm just going to show my face from now on, and that's it. Thank you for liking my glasses. You know, you could get glasses really cheap here. You know, it's funny. Some things are more expensive in South America. Some things are just healthcare in general, unbelievably cheap. Crapphone says, personally, I don't think I get influenced by influencers, but some of them do provide good information about new games and related stuff. Yeah, and I mean, that's fine. But I'm not saying that people who only have YouTube channels about the OSR are bad. In fact, they have a lot to contribute to the OSR. I'm just saying that you want to be careful about those people being the ones in charge, right? Sapphire Dragon says, I can see SJW becoming an overused derogatory word like the Yahtzee rhyming word. Yeah, I'm sure, that's a sign of just how much contempt people have for them, right? But the problem is that's also made it so that sometimes if you criticize hateful conduct that isn't from the left, you get accused immediately, oh, he's a leftist, right? Yeah, people are like, Pundit's always been a leftist, right? Well, I mean, I don't know what you mean by that. I'm a libertarian more than anything, But most of my views haven't changed, and I believe in modernism. I believe in Western Enlightenment values. I believe in the basically the stuff in the Declaration of Independence is what I believe in. Right? I believe in the stuff that Freemasons invented. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe that all men are created equal. They're endowed with their creator with inalienable rights. Those are all the things I believe. And to certain people, mostly disgusting people, that makes me either a fascist or a leftist, What else have we got? Meatball almost scrapped the whole live stream. That's right. My name says faking it until that person starts to have a life of their own. Yeah, that's pretty much how I remember it working when I played as a kid. Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing about children's make-believe is that I think that it takes up, it in its natural form, it has this space that is somewhere in between acting and dreaming, right? And so like kids that get deeply into a session of make-believe, whether it's like, playing pretend themselves or playing with action figures or Barbie dolls or something like that, they get into this completely separate space where suddenly they're not there, and there's this thing that they're doing with these characters that they're recreating. A lot of times it's just like recreating plots of episodes they've seen on TV or movies that they watched, right? But they're embodying these archetypes, right? And when that and at some point, most people lose that ability. And then what you have to do is kind of be able to recover that ability of understanding that like imaginary people, you knew this as a kid, right? Imaginary people are very real. They're real imaginary people. And if you can grasp that, which you knew as a child, but you don't know anymore, then you'll be able to capture the ability to create the living world in an RPG and to create a character that will create immersion, that will generate immersion for you. Sapphire Dragon says, problem I have with designing murder cults is clarifying what the cultists get out of it. Well, do you have Cults of Chaos? If you look there, they have part of the generator involves their goals. And then also when you decide what kind of cult they are, right? The section on the different sects usually talks about what the goal of the cult is to do, right? And I mean, some of them are heresies, some of them are to get personal power. Some of them are outright nuts, but they're all different, right? So what type of cult you pick and what type of generation it rolls, the social class of the cult, all of that changes it. Cults of Chaos is still mechanically, it's the greatest thing I ever designed, right? It's like the single greatest piece of game design I ever did. You know? It's incredibly useful. Wiley says, which kind of your products would work best for a duet kind of game? By duet, I'm assuming you mean single player and single DM. You know, I don't know. I mean, I generally craft any of my games with the idea of having an adventuring party of multiple players and one DM. Right? There's no system that'll work better with, none of my games will work better with more than one DM or less than one DM. But as far as players, that can be variable, right? I think, well, you know, it depends on what you want the single player to do, right? Because like, I guess in theory, if you're doing a Sword and Caravan game and you're doing it like as a, how do you call it? A kind of game of wandering, you know, where the character is an explorer more than about getting into a lot of combat or something like that. That might work, you know, potentially. Patrick Barnes says, is religion in Lion and Dragon based on medieval accounts of saints' miracle working like magic is based on authentically researched medieval magic? Yes, Patrick. In Lion and Dragon, the cleric class, their miracles, you'll know they have 8 miracles, right? And they are some of the most classic saint miracles, I guess you could say, right? Like exorcism type stuff, which includes kind of turning undead, right? Blessing people, inspiring people, having visions from God, healing the sick, you know, and the lame and the blind and the mad, right? And you know, it's that sort of thing, right? And blessing weapons before battle. And then if you get all 8 of the clerical miracles, your character then can do a divine intervention check and basically try to call directly on God to fix the problem, right? So it is meant to be. Clerics in Lion and Dragon are basically meant to be living saints, and you know, magisters, the magic users in Lion and Dragon, are basically like medieval alchemists and conjurers and things like that. So most of their stuff is ritual magic, right? Like they can create stuff like talismans and summon demons and things like that that you can then activate at a moment of action, right? But there's very few. There are some, but there's very, very few magister spells in Lion and Dragon, the core book itself, that is going to be useful without preparation in the middle of a fight. Whereas a cleric is all about being able to do something immediately, right? He just has to pray for it. Spam Man says, Pundy, been missing your takes on Twitter. Well, I'll mention again now because we've got probably a different crowd than when I started out here. So, you know, I'm going to try to do another appeal, and I'd be thankful if everybody who has Twitter after this live stream is done goes on Twitter, does a post where they say, you know, they put a mention of Twitter support. So you say something like, "Hey, at Twitter support, you know, the RPG Pundit has been given say Casimir. Sorry, do at Casimir Urbanski because that's my name, right? Has been blocked or has been suspended from Twitter, but it wasn't really, you know, he didn't really intend, you know, please reinstate him. His post was about what was meant to refer to ban hammer, to a block and not to a threat of violence. He used strong language but wasn't threatening violence or stuff like that, you know. If you post something like that, then I'll be able to, when I make the appeal, point out in the appeal that, you know, there's a lot of people that if you do a search for at Casimir Urbanski or Casimir Urbanski, you're going to see a lot of people pointing out that the ban was actually based on a misinterpretation of what I was saying. I was saying I'm going to block you, not I want to kill you, you know. Mulvey Inc. says, do you think the D20 system is the best system for OSR creativity due to familiarity? Well, it depends what you mean by the D20 system, because like the D20 system, if you mean like from the 3.0 era, you know, like the D20 games that came out at that time, third-party products that came out at that time. Well, third edition added some innovations and some streamlining that you can bring backwards into the OSR, right? Like in particular, there's a lot of OSR games that use the skill system, which is a D20 plus skill point plus ability score versus difficulty number, right? I mean, my games all basically use that. I don't use skill points to give for people to buy points, right? That's a much less OSR thing, right? That's not very old school. Whereas it's certainly not very old school D&D, right? Something like pick 3 skills and you start at +1 is a lot more old school than saying, well, you have 20 points and you can spread them among these skills, right? I don't care for that very much. But yeah, I mean, if what you just mean is like rolling D20s, yeah, that is the best system for RPG creativity, I would say, right? We've demonstrated that in the OSR by just how much incredible innovation you can make out of the old school D&D system. Sapphire Dragon says, fat, shirtless, haven't bathed, living the dream, in reference to Jim Raggy. Yeah, well, we each have our own dreams, My dream is getting to make money from writing RPGs and having enough money to be able to smoke a lot of pipes, Travis says, I will post your videos on Twitter till you get your account back. Night, everyone else. Yeah, that's the other thing you can do. Anytime you see that I've posted a new video, if you've got a Twitter account and I'm not back yet, please share the video on Twitter, especially because I used to put it on Twitter and now I'm not going to be able to do that. Lauren Jecko says, do you think Garibay is merely a character or is he really crazy? I don't know. I think the jury's out on that. It's hard to say. Garibay is weird, no question about it. Troy Williams says, you look and sound younger. I look and sound younger than what? Do you mean that I look younger than you thought I did based on my audio? Do you mean I also now sound younger than I did when you couldn't see my face? I'm going to have to explain yourself a little bit there, Troy. Crapphone says, gotta go. Good night, all. Thanks, Pundit. Interesting material. How about some videos with interesting obscurities that didn't fit in Line and Dragon, like background for Warwick the Kingmaker's family? Yeah, that could be interesting stuff. You're right. I might go into that. Bleeker says, most gamers that talk big about their ability to roleplay are actually lackluster when you witness them in action. The majority of us roleplay pretty much the same. You know what? There are some that really brag about it, and the problem is those are theater kids, and they're not actually doing immersion, most of them. Like a lot of them, what they're doing is just acting, and by that they mean overacting. And then that's actually, I would rather roleplay with a guy who is, who's not really doing any great effort at role-playing at all than a guy who's doing, full-assed overacting and thinking that that's them role-playing, right? Because actual role-playing is not about, that's one of the problems I have with Critical Role. They're not immersed in their characters. Those characters don't exist. Those are actors doing acting of being these people, and those people don't exist. They're just things that they're pretending to be, with really bad C-grade actor overacting, because they're all, C-grade actors in Critical Role and all these other shows. And that's horrible, right? And what's worse is that because the actor thinks that that's what role-playing amounts to, in a lot of cases, they're going to have a much harder time ever actually achieving immersion, even than like the schlub that only plays fighters and mostly just wants to fight and doesn't do any serious role playing. Even that guy, if enough things happen to his character and he starts to react based on those things that happen, and then suddenly there might be a moment where he's going to start to immerse in a way that the guy who's too busy being super impressed with how well he portrays his dashing bard or something. It's always going to be a bard with these people, he's that guy is probably never going to have immersion. They're just going to have different degrees of overacting. Condor DM said, I have to go. Hope this Twitter situation turns around for you. Thank you, Condor DM. Condor DM is an interesting guy. He's got a channel too, and I've seen, some of his videos I'm not totally on board with maybe, but some of them are good and some of them are interesting. And we had a big debate about certain things But he's a bit of a sophist, I'll have to say. But then, when I got banned, he's one of the guys that jumped up and said, this is bullshit, right? And so thank you for that, Condor DM, because, you and I had just, as part of the events of the past week, you and I had a huge debate, right? We had a huge fight, basically. Insults were thrown in every direction. And yet you went ahead and did that. So good for you. Let's see what else. Wiley Ductalis says, I lost my Twitter last year right before Elon took the helm, went down with the Vikings funeral. Well, Wiley, you know that if you do an appeal now, there's a very good chance you'd be reinstated, because people that were banned pre-Elon, they're giving almost all of them the benefit of the doubt, So if you really want to go back on Twitter, you could try to get it restored, or, and if not, you could do it anyways and then just use it to post, pundit stuff. Charlotte Williams says, Musk has turned Twitter into a walled garden, so I can't say it. Well, there's some really weird stuff going on. Like, I was joking, but maybe it's destiny that, you kick a wizard off Twitter and the next thing you know, everybody's going to see more than 600 tweets before they're blocked, right? So, the day after they kicked me out, all of their whole setup went to shit, apparently. I don't know why, but they're doing all these restrictions now, and it's really a stupid idea, right? Like, I don't care what your problem is. If you take the people who are obsessed with Twitter and you suddenly tell them, guess what? You can't look at more than 6,000 tweets in a day. You're screwing your own customer base, and that you want to end up having someone make a successful alternative to Twitter. That's how you end up doing it. You get all the addicts and you cut off, you cut them off of their fix, not a good idea, Elon. No matter what it is that's going on, figure out another way to fix it, because it's not a good way to deal with this issue. Kleinman says, there's nothing easier in the world than starting a Discord page. Yeah, but there's also not anything useful about doing a Discord page, right? Like, I've tried. Since I got banned, I went again into Discord and started looking around, and like there's some Discords that have a few dozen people, some that have a few hundred people. You got to do a lot of effort to get those people. Those people are also found elsewhere. I just don't get the point. I don't understand. Like, the point of Twitter is I can put a tweet out and people who have no idea who I am might see that tweet and they will retweet it and other people will see it. On a Discord, it's just you and your buddies and they're all going to see it. It's just like an internal circle jerk, right? So in terms of like expanding the word beyond the ghetto of the people you already know, Discord is no use for that. Discord might be useful for other things, and in a way similar, like WhatsApp groups can be useful for people that are already connected to each other to organize stuff. Sure, that could be useful. But as far as social media for, promoting products or increasing your brand, if that's as the influencers would say, it's not so useful, unfortunately. But I will tell you guys some places where I am now and where you should be too, especially if you miss me from Twitter. And I'm on here first and foremost. Like, this is a big thing. I am going to be doing more videos here than I did before. I'm not going to do a video every day. Probably not even close, right? But I'm going to do more videos. And I'm probably going to start doing more live streams because I do like live streams. I didn't do them for a long time because, they don't get as many views ultimately. But what they get is that they're a reward to some of my most some of my most loyal fans, right? The people that watch live streams are the people that really, really like you more than anybody else does. And one thing I learned out of all this, like I said, there were some people I was terribly disappointed with in how they reacted to both the Bro SR thing and to me being banned. And other people that I was surprised that were unexpectedly heroic. And then a few people that were tried and true, right? Like Venger was a rock, and good for him, right? And the Red Room, and me and the Red Room have really good relationship. It's very funny because there are some people that absolutely despise me, including like this guy that was constantly harassing me during the Bro SR thing, who didn't hate me because he was in the Bro SR. He hated me because he thought I'd been mean to the Red Room, right? But the Red Room people and I get along really, really well, I wouldn't be surprised if someday there'll be some kind of collaboration going on too, right? So they were really good, and some other people are really good. But the people that were most really good were you guys. The response I got from you here and in other places, but that was clearly from the people that are my subscribers here on the YouTube channel, right? So I'm going to be doing more stuff on YouTube and trying to do more stuff that is for you, okay? But there, that isn't something I'm not going to do 50 community posts a day. I might do one a day, maybe, right? You'll probably get a lot of pictures of Meatball, which I used to put on Twitter. But why am I putting it on Twitter when you're the ones who love Meatball the most, right? So every day I'll try to, every day I'm not doing like announcing a live stream or something at least, I'll try to give you a picture of Meatball. Why not, right? There you go. That's my promise to you. More Meatball. And I hope that if that doesn't earn me some people buying buying an RPG Pundit Presents book as the equivalent of a super chat, if that doesn't do it, I don't know what will. You guys love Meatball. I know that. So that's one thing. But there are other places now that I'm obviously going to be spending more of my time on than I used to because Twitter's gone, for me at least. And one of them is obviously the RPG site. The RPG site is an internet forum, www.therpgsite.com. that I own, that I've owned for years. It's one of the biggest tabletop RPG forum, internet, message boards or forums around. It's been around for getting close to 20 years now. It's still very, very active. It's one of the best places to go to talk about the OSR. It is a free speech website, right? There are more rules than 4chan, right? Like you're not allowed to post pirated material. You're not allowed to post porn. You're not allowed to post, certain other things. One of them being, racist material or what have you. But if you're posting on topic stuff, as far as RPGs, it doesn't matter if you're left wing or right wing. You can both go there. You can both say your things, but you can't post off topic. But you can post on the subject of games about anything you like, right? And so it's a very active place. And I know that probably some of you are. Well, a lot of you are probably older, right? So you probably do have some experience with internet forums, and you're going to be familiar, with this. So that's fine, I guess. But some of you might not be. Some of you might be from the era where the first things you used on the internet were like Facebook, maybe, or maybe not even that, right? Maybe the first thing was Instagram or whatever, or Twitter. But yeah, so like the internet forum it's like a chat room, except that the messages stay there. I don't know. I guess that's the way to explain it. But that makes it a really good place to have long discussions. We have some threads that are hundreds of pages long on certain topics, right? And like I said, it's one of the main places for OSR conversation. So that's number 2 right after YouTube. Number 3 is Mewe, Mewe.com. It's a social media site that had originally started as an attempt to be a competitor to both Facebook and Twitter. It did not succeed as either one of those, obviously. Otherwise, you'd know what they are. You'd have heard of Mewe, right? But where Mewe did succeed, in that the reason why it still exists, I think, is because it managed to capture a whole bunch of people that have niche interests. First of all, it's a free speech site, like Elon has now made Twitter. That's become kind of irrelevant, but it's a big believer in free speech. The guy that made Mewe, and it has a whole bunch of different subcultures that have put up camp there, because one of the things you can do, unlike Twitter but similar in certain ways to Facebook, is you can create groups, and those groups also have chats, like group chats, right? So I have three groups on Mewe. I have the Inglorious OSR, which is an OSR group, an OSR discussion group, and it has almost 1,200 members, okay? So that's a big group, right? And then I have the Dark Albion and Lion and Dragon group, and it has, I think, 150 members. And I also have the Dungeon Crawl Classics group, which is where I put a lot of Last Sun stuff, and that has more than 1,000 members. And so this is a really, really good place. You go there. The link is in the description of any of my regular videos. I didn't actually get a description done for this video yet, but once it's done being live streamed, but go to any of my other videos, click on the description of the video, and you get a long list of all my products. And somewhere near the bottom, it says, on Mewe, I think Casimir Urbanski. I don't remember right now, but I think that's what I am, or the RPG Pundit, one of the two. And so, Casimir Urbanski. Okay, so you can go there, you add me as a friend, and then you follow all the people that are following me, and you're going to get a ton of gamers. And then you go to the group section, you find the Inglorious OSR, you find, there are other ones too. The Red Room has a group there. There's Ten Cars Tavern. There's some other OSR groups that are very good. There's the OSR group. I think that was the Evil DM that made it. I think so. So there's a lot of these groups. You can find groups for other games too, right? Like there's, Cthulhu, Traveler, the Fantasy Trip, all kinds of stuff. So it is a great community if you're into tabletop games. Check that out. You will like it. And I guess the third thing, a distant third, I would say, but it's still a third thing nonetheless, is Facebook. On Facebook, I have a page, which is to say the RPG Pundit. So facebook.com/RPGPundit/, right? That'll take you to the RPG Pundit's page, right? And so if you follow me there, I do regular posts there. I also do posts in some Facebook groups. There are not a lot of groups that are really welcoming to either the OSR in general or conservative people in the OSR in particular, right? But there is one called Conservative OSR and RPG Group. There's another one called OSR HQ. There's a Red Room group. There's Ten Cars Tavern, but he's really wimpy there. Like in Ten Cars Discord and Ten Cars Mewe group, you can talk freely about anything, and you can make posts that are critical of wokeists. But if you try to post critical of wokeists on Ten Cars Facebook group, he'll block it because he's scared of it getting banned, I guess. I mean, it's fair enough. So those are the places that you're going to be able to find me. So if you want to stay in touch with me, I recommend that you either sign up on the RPG site or sign up on Mewe and join the Inglorious OSR, or if you're already on Facebook, you follow my RPG Pundit page at least, right? And then that would be a good idea, That would be a way for you to not lose track of me just because I'm not on Twitter anymore. Let's see what else you guys are talking about here. Because I've got one more thing I really want to cover with you guys before I finish, but I'm also always alert to any questions you might have. Nosarian says, I'm not on Twitter. My mom is, though. I was like, for a second, I thought that was like a your mom joke, but I'm not sure. Maybe his mom really is on Twitter. My name says skill points are pretty much the antithesis of old school. Absolutely. In fact, having defined skill lists is something I'm not a big fan of either. You'll notice in Lion and Dragon, there's no place where I have a complete list. These are all the skills, right? Theoretically, anything can be a skill in Lion and Dragon. There are some skills that are specifically tied to some classes, right? But in theory, I don't know. I don't have a skill for basket weaving, but I guess a character could have basket weaving +1, right? There you are. My name says no meerschaum pipes. Well, actually, I do. At present, I have 3 meerschaum pipes, 3 real meerschaum pipes, and 1 meerschaum line pipe. So I do have meerschaum pipes. The meerschaum pipes are fancy pipes, and they're kind of fragile, and they also require a lot of attention when you're smoking them. So you'll probably never see me smoking them during a live stream or when I'm doing anything else. Like that's something I only smoke them at home. I only smoke because I've owned probably over the years, maybe like 20 meerschaum pipes. And the fact that I have 3 now means that there's 17 that I broke, right, in some way or another that I ruined. Meerschaum pipes are very tricky. Charlotte Williams says, my dream at this point is to abandon society and live in the woods. Well, come to South America, maybe. Eric C says, I started with Mold Bay Red Box. I feel really old. Well, I started with Mold Bay Red Box too, yeah. Mark Markham says, a lot of people who brag don't even play or run games that last more than 5 sessions, but they have a lot to say on their YouTube channel every week. Yeah, and so, okay, if they're talking about like products, maybe if they've been a gamer for a long time, they just haven't been a very successful gamer, they might still know something about products, but chances are they probably aren't, right? Like chances are that they haven't been role-playing for that long either. So, you know, why are you going to take like Ginny D's advice on any product? She doesn't know 95% of the industry. She doesn't know the history. She doesn't know any of this, right? Like she doesn't have enough experience to know what she's talking about, right? And there are the people that don't actually run campaigns that last more than 5 sessions have nothing to tell you about how to play or DM RPGs because they have no idea how they don't even know what the point of RPGs are. You can't, if you've never run a campaign that goes for at least 200 hours of play, you haven't actually reached the level of full understanding of what the RPG experience is. So you'll know some things about RPGs, obviously. You know, you'll know about casual play, but you're not going to understand the real end goal of playing RPGs, right? The alpha state that gets achieved after you've run a campaign that takes on a life of its own. That's why Jeffro Johnson doesn't know anything about RPGs. He's never run a long-term campaign. Dark Mist says, I wouldn't call those actors a proper actors able to bring a character to life, so they insult the name of any actor, in my opinion. One must become a character total immersion to properly act. Well, you know, most actors don't do that, though. Yeah, there's the method actor people, but method acting is also not exactly the same as immersion. It just isn't. Because in method acting, you lose yourself completely into the role. That's not what happens when you're playing a character and get to the state of immersion. And when you're playing in an RPG and you achieve full immersion, you are completely cognizant of yourself. And at the same time, whatever Ragnar the Barbarian that you're playing exists and is doing choices, and you are speaking through, you know, he is speaking through you, but he is not you. You haven't turned into Ragnar. That's not the goal. Like, that's method acting's goal. It's like for you to, you know, for Joaquin Phoenix to become the Joker, right? That's method acting. Most actors don't do that either. They're just like, you know, it's just whatever. Doug McClure pretending to be Trampas in The Virginian, right? It's just acting, right? Neither of those are immersion, right? Immersion is something separate to both. But yeah, most actors, you know, the difference is if you act well or not is if you trick other people into thinking that you have the personality that you're portraying, right? That's acting, but that's not immersion in role-playing. Immersion in role-playing is when suddenly there's another entity in your consciousness that has a completely different personality and whose actions you cannot predict anymore by simply thinking them through, but rather who starts to act with a voice and life of its own, you know. And I don't necessarily mean all of that literally. Like, I don't mean that you're like having a conversation in your head or that suddenly you're seeing Ragnar the Barbarian in front of you or something. But it's more like that moment when the DM says, what do? You suddenly blurt something out that didn't come from your head, that you didn't think through. Okay, well, what's Ragnar going to do here? No, you just say, no, I jump for the lizard man, right? Okay, you know, and you're like, wait, why did I say that, right? Oh yeah, well, it's because that's what Ragnar wants to do, right? And that's immersion. People need more than 6,000 tweets a day. Oh, you sweet summer child, Bleecker. Okay, let me say something. One of the things people recommended that I might do is talk about video games. And just like Ginny D knows almost nothing about RPGs and Jeffro Johnson isn't qualified to talk about RPGs, I know almost nothing and I'm not qualified to talk about video games, okay? Because I don't play any video games. There's only one massive multiplayer RPG that I absolutely loved and played obsessively, and that was Twitter. Twitter was my massive multiplayer RPG. And yeah, I mean, like, somebody else said that. Well, it doesn't matter if the throttling is, if you're verified, you're still going to get 6,000 tweets, dude. I'm like, dude, that's 2 hours for me. Like, what do I do with the rest of the day? So, this is what happens when you kick me out. All right. Trevor says, I'll check out some of your RPGs, but can I use them in a solo gameplay? Well, I mean, you can use anything in a solo gameplay. There are some people that have made products, Kevin Crawford, for example, that are made specifically for solo play. Now, none of my games are made specifically for solo play, but a lot of my games, like, say you're running Sword and Caravan. Just let's say you got the Sword and Caravan book, maybe you got Lion and Dragon 2, or maybe you're running it with, I don't know, BX D&D or something, but you're using the setting book. So there, you've got like a whole set of mechanics of potential random encounters, events that happen in cities when you get to them, random tables for like people you might meet at a caravanserai, that is to say like an inn, right? Or random groups with different complications, a random village generator. You have a random chance that the authorities of a city, town, or village will notice you and kind of want to get rid of you, kick you out or something like that. All of that stuff is a set of formulas and tables that I've created. And when I DM Sword and Caravan, I use all of those. And so like, one of the things, I've had my Sword and Caravan campaign players are very pleased with that campaign, and they were telling me how great it is. I'm telling you, yeah, but you guys realize that like, I never have any idea what's about to happen in this campaign, just as much as you don't. It's not that I've been like a master storyteller, right? And it's that I've been using the tables in Sword and Caravan. I've been using the generators that I created. And so I never know what's going to happen next. I've been basing everything on reactions that are naturally occurring to the things your characters do, and to the random generators that are appropriate for a situation, right? And then filling in just filling in the details out of that, right? So like theoretically, if you're playing it as a solo game, you could probably do a lot better with that than with a lot of other RPG products, right? Jonathan Reese says, Cult of Chaos ordered, great explanation for it, looking forward to digging through. Well, I really doubt you'll be disappointed. I still, it's not, I love all of my games, but that one I think was just me at a particular moment of genius, of like the most complex generator of table, random table generator that I'd ever created, which isn't like a thing that generates random tables, but rather a generator based on a series of interconnected random tables, right? And like usually you do that with 2 or 3 tables. And this one is like way more complex than that. It has like a bunch of different cascading effects. And it's meant to be that like you could use it 1,000 times, and the group that you're going to create, the scenario that they find themselves in is going to be different every time, the story, or the adventure that comes out of that is going to be different. So I think it's really good. Laranquejo says, one thing I wish was better reworked in RPGs is the currency system. I find it very strange that gold is the standard currency when peasants use barter and copper coins. Well, in Lion and Dragon, guess what? I don't know if you've got Lion and Dragon, Laranquejo, but the base in Lion and Dragon, it actually states that the base unit of currency is the egg. Okay, not everybody who's read Lion and Dragon noticed that, right? But actually, the egg is the lowest unit of currency, and then just immediately above that is the copper penny, and then above that is the silver shilling. And almost nobody there's no such thing in 15th century England. There was no such thing as a pound coin. The pound existed as a unit of currency, but it was just a classification. No coins that were worth a pound. There were no gold coins, right? So, that is it. And I make it very clear in Lion and Dragon, one of the elements of medieval authentic play is that almost nobody handles money, right? You don't have money, right? Merchants have money. And sometimes city dwellers have a little bit of money. Sometimes, you might momentarily have some money if you're buying or selling, you're taking food wares to the market. But 90% of what you're doing is actually the exchange of labor or favors or goods for goods, right? All 3 of those. It's barter, as you say, right? Lion and Dragon is actually interesting because it's at the very peak Middle Ages, high Middle Ages, the late Middle Ages, rather. So it means that, like at the start of the War of the Roses, England was medieval. At the end of the War with the Roses, England was a Renaissance country, right? So this was like a 30-year time span. It was that moment where it stopped being the Middle Ages and started being the Renaissance. So you'd have an evolution, right? Like at the beginning of a campaign of Dark Albion, people would still be doing a huge amount of barter. There'd be very few coins, right? And by the end of the campaign, there'd be a lot of coins and there'd be much less barter. You know, and there'd also be gunpowder, right? There wasn't gunpowder at the start of the campaign. A whole bunch of stuff like that, you know. What else have we got here? Eric C says Discord is not good for expanding, but it is good for a community to hang out. Well, I've already got that though. I've got the RPG site. You know, like the RPG site is a good community to hang out. And I've got the Inglorious OSR on Mewe. And like, you know, screw Discord and Gilded. Mewe is where it's at. Because for one thing, in Discord, you have to get word of mouth about where the servers are. That pisses me off immensely. I don't know, for some reason, Gen Z kids like that because they think it helps them hide what they're doing from their parents. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, like, I'm convinced that's the reason why anyone would do something that stupid with social media, right? Because the whole point of social media has to be that you can spread the word and that you can find other people in other groups, right? So with the fact that in Discord, there's no way to search for a Discord server that is topical to you, that you have to like go on a website somewhere and they might have some, but not all of the Discord servers, and good luck finding it, right? Like that seems moronic to me, right? Like, so on Mewe, at least you can search for groups, you know, like you can on Facebook or whatever, right? Because it wasn't made by kids that don't want mommy and daddy to know that they're cosplaying as a, you know, in a fursuit or something, you know? Anyway, looking at the chat here. Langeco says, I wish there were rules for maintaining merchant caravans and trade warfare in the new Sword and Caravan Settlement. Well, you know what? That's not a bad idea or something to consider doing in the future, because I do not have that in Sword and Caravan. Now, I do have some stuff about caravans that I put in that is in the Old School Companion. It was originally in an RPGPundit Presents issue. Trying to remember which one that would have been, but can't say for sure. It's probably Medieval Caravans or something like that. Anyway, I'm not going to look it up right now. But, you know, I had some stuff about it, but I never wanted to create like a traveler-style trade system. I mean, like Axe does that, I know. So, you know, if you really need to, I guess you can use Adventure Conquer King for that. But I would rather like have that seems a little bit too over the top for me. Like I do have rules about, you know, running a business. And so a merchant caravan is a business and that's what you're doing. And then if you want to have a trade war, you know, you do it by individual encounters and role playing, right? Like my mind has changed a lot about this because like at one point I was like thinking, yeah, that's really cool to have like a set of these sophisticated trade rules and with like all these different influences of things, right? But that doesn't seem to me to like reflect how the view of the player character would be from the ground. It's like, for example, in my next big book, Baptism of Fire, which is basically going to be like Lion and Dragon Revised Edition. It's going to be the complete rule set with like a bunch of expanded material added to like the core Lion and Dragon rules, right? It's not going to be different. It's not going to change most of the rules. It's going to change a few things like some character classes and stuff, but it's not going to change the fundamentals of the rules. So I wouldn't say it's a new edition, but it's an expanded version. But one thing I'm going to change, for example, not from Lion and Dragon, because it wasn't in there, but in Dark Albion, there were rules for like domain play. And they're not bad rules, but they look at it completely from a meta perspective of like you as the player, right? And so it was like, you know, you have these different attribute values of military and political and financial power, and you could do moves and things like that, right? And the new rules I'm going to have for dominions, for domains, right, in Baptism of Fire is going to be totally different. It's going to be based where the main attributes that you have to work at maintaining and regulating are the happiness of your peasants and the loyalty of your hirelings, right? The loyalty of your henchmen, of your, what do you call it? Your men-at-arms and your headmen, right? So it's because really running a dominion in the Middle Ages would not have been about like trying to send orders to someone or like, you know, give different rules and commands or working out like these figures and numbers. It would have been about being able to figure out how to stop your peasants from revolting, make sure they're producing rather than revolting, right? And how to have people that you could trust enough that you can give them orders and that they can run things for you, right? And that's like way more immersive in the you know, putting you into the actual world than putting it up on a meta level. And I think that that's a better way to do it. And I think trade would be the same. Maybe I'm going to think about trying to do something equivalent to that with being like a trader and how you would run that in a way that would look very different from the kind of traveler model of doing it, you know. What next here? Lauren Jacob also says, in the game here, the silver coin replaces the gold as a calculation standard. My name says, I tried Mewe. It was so sad. Well, did you get into the groups though, my name? Like, did you go? I mean, if you're an OSR guy, did you try the Inglorious OSR? Like, because the Inglorious OSR has not only the group, but also the chat, and it's being used on a daily basis, right? It's got a lot of good stuff there. I don't know. There's other ones that are even bigger than the Inglorious OSR. Maybe not as cool, you know, but like the OSR Mewe group. Like, I think the secret of Mewe is you've got to find people, and like the first couple of people you find that are OSR people that you add, you see who's following, who they're following, and add those people too. Like, send out your invites, get all those people in there, and then, you know, get into the groups, and like it becomes it turns out to be like really great because there's a lot of activity in this compact area, you know. And I don't know what else happens on Mewe because like I've been told that there are other subcultures that are into it, right? Like, but it's something that you don't, that if your thing is RPGs, and like in my case, my thing is RPGs, right? And the only thing I see on Mewe is RPG stuff, because everybody I follow is also people who are in RPG stuff, right? Once in a while you see comics, maybe something like that, you know, but you know, nerd stuff, but mostly it's like 90% the content on, like, if I don't often look at my feed, but I've been looking at it a bit more in the last couple of days since I can't look at a Twitter feed. And in the feed there, it's all RPGs, right? Because everybody that I'm following, all the people that I have as contacts on Mewe are RPG people, you know, and so that's pretty damn cool, you know. Umbran says, what's the meaning of the username Casimir Urbanski? That's my name. My name is Casimir Urbanski. Sam Vasco says, thank you, Pundit. Welcome to the OSR HQ. Okay, I'm guessing a bunch of people went on Facebook and joined OSR HQ. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you, Sam. I love your group. And, you know, it's one of very, very few groups on Facebook that are for RPGs that are right-leaning as opposed to left-leaning, you know. And the problem with the left-leaning groups is that if you're right-leaning, they kick you out of them, you know. Dome Servio says, Tenkar pretends to be neutral but ends up being a useful idiot. Well, I don't know. The way he acts. Okay, I'm going to say this about Tenkar, right? Tenkar, he posted like he stood up for me, right, when a lot of other people didn't, right? So, you know, that's good. And the thing is, Tenkar, I mean, Tenkar's a guy, he's an influencer, right? He doesn't write RPGs. Tenkar is maybe the oldest influencer in the OSR, right? He's the one that's been around the longest, that is like mainly his thing is he's a blogger and then a YouTube guy. He's not a designer. He's not a game designer, or at least not that first, certainly. And so like he's the archetype of the influencer, right? And so that means that when his brand is the thing he wants to protect, he's going to protect the brand, right? But even he, maybe because he's older, because he's very well established at this point, I don't think anyone's going to get. I think that losing 2 or 3 subscribers is not going to kill him in any sense, right? Maybe because of that, he was actually one of the people that stood up and said something, you know. Oh, come here, meatball. Got a meatball here. So she'll go on my shoulder here. All right. There we go. Bleeker says, I don't think my friends would take me seriously if I started smoking a pipe. I could never pull it off. John Fraser says, your mama is on Twitter so much that she turned into a bluebird. That's not a very good your mama joke. You're going to have to try harder, you know. That's what I said to your mama, by the way. What I like about Meerschaum pipes, says Patrick Barnes, that each one develops its own character as it ages and the color becomes rich and warm over time. Yes. Though in some cases with me, a lot of my earlier Meerschaum pipes, they just turned black over time. So that tells you how I mishandled them. What else can I say? I have Surreal Redux says, I have Lion Dragon and the other supplements. Which of the Pundit Presents books should I get? I know some of them are gathered in the compendiums. Well, yeah, I think pretty much everything in RPG Pundit 1 to 50 is now in one of the compendiums, right? Some of the stuff from 50 and up are not, you know, like, and then, I mean, I can't go into issue by issue detail with you here. The later the issue, the less likely it's in a compendium. Let's put it that way. My name says I had years of acting class as a kid. You're absolutely right. Role playing is not acting. Cranafel says I was told we can only play characters if it reflects our real life person. Not true. The whole point of randomly generating a character is to play something different from yourself. Charlotte says there are people who just wake up and scroll through Twitter till they pass out. Have you been filming me, Charlotte? Are you secretly filming me somehow? My name says, I think the point of the limit is to prevent it from being an addiction. No, the point of the limit is that there's AI scrapers, probably sent by like Meta and Microsoft, that are constantly scraping data from Twitter, and it's basically overloading Twitter, and then and the way to kill, and like they're in the form of bots, right, of fake accounts. And the problem is, I think maybe that with AI improving at an incredible rate, they are now able to create fake accounts that look so real that it becomes impossible for Twitter's bots to identify it as a potential fake account. It's like they're convinced that it's a real account, you know, because of how much of an effective fake they can make now with an AI. And so this is all causing a lot of problems for Elon. And I mean, that what that means is that you literally have like some supposed Twitter account of a person, but it's not really a person, it's an AI, is looking at, I don't know, 10 million tweets a day, right? And that's what they have to stop, right? So that's why they put the limit of how many tweets you can look at in a day. But the problem is that that's not going to be good enough for most people that are in Twitter, right? Like most people are on Twitter. You know, there are people that are on Twitter that like go on Twitter once a month or something like that. And then there's people that go on Twitter for like hours of their entire time, and they're basically checking their Twitter constantly anytime that they have a spare moment, right? And I was one of those guys, right? Like I said, it's my favorite massive multiplayer RPG, you know. So that's the problem that Elon Musk is having, that has caused him to try to bottleneck Twitter in a way that is throttling, unfortunately, the actual users. Shark says, Pundit, where do you get your pipes from Uruguay? Well, most of my pipes aren't from Uruguay. Most of my pipes I get from abroad when I travel abroad or something like that. Tobacco I sometimes bring also from abroad, or there are some good brands of. There are a couple of international brands that are imported to Uruguay or Argentina that I can buy from here. So like what I'm smoking right now is an English flake called Balkan flake, ironically, that comes from the UK, but that I bought here in Uruguay, right? But then there's also there's one brand of pipe tobacco in Argentina. It's called Argento, and they make pretty good pipe tobacco, at least at the type of tobaccos at the level of tobaccos that I smoke. So yeah, that's what I engage in there. Chaos Druid says, still using Cults of Chaos book for multiple games along with Albion. Thanks for the good work. Thanks for name dropping Aquelarre in a video. I love that game. Love Medieval Spain. Well, Aquelarre was a major influence on Dark Albion, and therefore also on Lion and Dragon. Dark Albion essentially started me saying, well, wait a minute, why don't I do a campaign like Aquelarre, but set in medieval England? I didn't end up using Aquelarre for it. I ended up using Lamentations at first, and then I started house ruling it until it became the prototype of Lion and Dragon, which you still see if you have Dark Albion, in the appendix of Dark Albion, there's what I call Appendix P, and it's the most bare bones version of the Lion and Dragon rules. It's there, right? Nicholas Taylor says, I think we should have a forum. Well, I already have a forum, Nicholas Taylor. www.therpgsite.com. And it's an incredibly good role-playing discussion forum. The Sargent says, I was happy about gunpowder, and I don't think it breaks most games. Remember, the late Middle Ages had gunpowder. I'm sorry, it did. It's not anachronistic. It's completely real. Gunpowder in L&D works. Yeah, well, I tried to make it as realistic as possible without getting, ridiculous about it. Nicholas Taylor says, Mewe groups are fun, even disparately minded people on there. I dig that. Problem with radical left groups, says the man, is that says my name is that if you disagree with the dogma, you're dogpiled and silenced. Olaf Mickley says, I know Tenkar because he's pretty intertwined with Frog God. Okay. +5 helm of meatball. I like that. It looks like Pundit has a big brown wig. Well, I could probably use one. Olaf Mickley says, are you permabanned on Twitter for being mean to a Yahtzee, or is it just a temporary ban? No, it is not a temporary ban. It's not a ban till I delete a tweet. It is officially a permanent ban that I've been told I am allowed to appeal. But yeah, at the moment, it's permanent as far as what I understand Twitter told me, So that's basically the deal. My name says, I don't really think Musk bought Twitter with the idea I was going to make any money off it. He actually kind of talks about that and mocks the idea. Yeah, no, I don't think Twitter was meant to make money as Twitter for him. I do think that, Elon Musk didn't buy a social media company. He bought a crime scene, first of all, and that was something of great interest to him. And second, he bought an enormous and an extremely valuable fountain of information, right? And so that's not a value that is direct monetarily right there, but to be the guy that has the control over that information is significant, right? But then besides that, I think he is going to try to turn Twitter into the X app and try to become basically a competitor against Facebook, against YouTube, against Patreon, against PayPal, against everything, right? Like to be the one stop for all of the things that we currently do in disparate media apps, which could be a real problem for me if it turns out to work and it turns out that I'm permabanned from it. And I think that's an argument for why that would require, trust busting. Glenafel says, I miss Dragon Magazine. Well, check out Mad Scribe Magazine on DriveThruRPG. Do a search for it, Mad Scribe Magazine. It's done by one of my publishers. I don't make any money from Mad Scribe Magazine, but I have written some articles for it that I was paid for to do, but I don't make any profit. Yeah, I love Strong Latakia, Patrick Barnes. Okay, I think I've caught up. Yes, okay, I've caught up. So I'm going to talk about now that it's now 2:30, 2 hours and 30 minutes into the live stream. So I'm going to talk about the final point here, which is I'm trying to think of, other stuff I can do. And so now I am finishing work on a big book. And then I will have other big books to do in the future, of course. But this is a particularly big book, Baptism of Fire, which I hope will be a big success also. It's going to bring a more definitive edition of Lion and Dragon that incorporates some of the stuff that I developed after publishing Lion and Dragon. It's going to have a totally different setting from Dark Albion, so you can still use it combined with Dark Albion. There's going to be stuff in Lion and Dragon that won't be on Baptism of Fire, like the alchemy rules, because it wouldn't fit the 11th century Poland setting. But there's going to be stuff in Baptism of Fire that obviously isn't in Lion and Dragon. And the monster compendiums will be different, so it'll be complementary, but also an expansion of the original L&D rules. There's going to be some very interesting mechanics in there, all of that, right? And then it's going to come out soon. And long before it comes out, I'm going to be done doing any work myself on it, because it's coming very close now to the point where I hand it over to my publisher, right? To Mad Scribe Games, probably. At the moment, it's Mad Scribe Games. If they get these source books out on time, it'll be Mad Scribe Games. I don't know if he's here or not, but maybe he is. And then after that, I don't have to do anything else about that, right? And I could just jump into another big book, but I've also got it in mind that I might want to do something a little different. Like I might want to, what I might want to do is something closer to being along the lines of the RPG Pundit Presents series. And I've been thinking about the possibility of doing some kind of a subscription-based offering. So I want to know from you guys whether you would be interested in having something that was like, because the problem with RPG Pundit Presents, it worked really well when Spectre was really on the ball. But then, eventually publishers always end up having other projects also, right? That's the one disadvantage. The advantage is I don't have to try to publish anything, so I would be a disaster as a publisher. The bad thing is I'm then trapped by whatever their timetable is. And so if their life gets complicated, suddenly my book gets delayed 6 more months, right? And that's a real issue. And that's why I go from one publisher to another, among other things, right? It's to diversify myself, but it's also because I know that at certain points, publishers get caught up in other things and they just end up not being able to put the time to get stuff out of mine and at the rate I want it out. So what I would want to know is if I set up some kind of a subscription model, which might be on something like Patreon, or it might be on maybe on YouTube if I can now do subscriptions, and if that sort of model would work with something other than videos, I don't know. I was originally, before I was banned, I was thinking about the potential of this being done in due time in Twitter, right? So all of those are possibilities, or it might be something else. I might do it via a mailing list or something. And the idea would be that people would pay a subscription whatever amount a month. I don't know how much, $10 a month, let's say, right? And they would end up receiving material that would be similar to RPGPundit Presents. So it could be adventures, source books, splat books, new monsters, new magic items, weird stuff, campaign setting areas, random tables, DMing advice, whatever came to mind. And it would be a minimum page count per month, right? And so it might be more than that, but it wouldn't be any less. And it would be, it might be one single PDF, or it might be, 2 or 3 PDFs in a month, depending on the size, right? And so you would get that as a regular service. So you've subscribed, and so in August, you're going to get these 2 PDFs with these topics, and there you go, right? And people will be able to, to get those and to keep, and as they keep subscribing, they'll keep getting more of them. If you subscribe late, then you won't get the ones that came out earlier, but you'll get the ones from then onwards. And eventually, if I make enough of these, I could put them into an actual book format and stuff like that. And what I'm envisioning is that I would want to do something either with no real editing, or not editing, but with no real production, or with like some kind of really bare bones production from some kind of volunteer publisher or something. That'd be just like a template. So it would be stuff that wouldn't be like, it wouldn't have art, even less so than RPGPundit Presents. It would be a PDF, but it would be a no thrills sort of PDF in terms of the look, but it would be content. It would be special content that you would get. And I'm curious to just generally poll the audience of my live stream as to whether they would find that interesting and worthwhile or not. Because I don't want to start trying to do this if it's actually like, nobody's going to be into it, right? But I get the feeling that there might be some people that could be, right? Like, so if more or less, let's say if for paying whatever, $10 on a month, you would end up getting the equivalent of 2 or 3 issues of RPGPundit Presents, except they'd be new, right? And they wouldn't have any art, but there would be new issues of RPGPundit Presents that nobody else gets to have. And you would get that every month for that monthly fee. Would that be something you would find attractive? And obviously, some issues would probably be more relevant to you than others, or more useful to you than others. But they would all be, stuff that I'm making and trying to do a good job on. That much I can promise, right? And I would go around varying the topics and the things that would be reduced, right? So I'd probably, if I did an adventure last time, I probably would do not an adventure this time. Quantifel, okay, I'm looking at some comments here. Quantifel said, some female took your name on their RPG. What the hell? Are you talking to me, Quantifel? I have no idea what you're talking about. Black Lodge Games says, appeal would likely go through. Well, my first appeal did not go through, Black Lodge Games, but apparently I can appeal again. And that's why I'm telling people, after you're done the live stream, when you're leaving, if you've got Twitter, go on Twitter and just do some post to like where you mention to Twitter support. You go at Twitter support. Please reinstate at Kazimir Urbanski, because he was there. The ban was a misunderstanding or misrepresentation. He was not threatening violence. He was referring to blocking when he used the term hammer, as in the ban hammer, or something like that, right? So the more of those that are on there, that when I make my appeal, I will tell whoever I'm writing to, the mysterious person and or robot that I am appealing to. If you do a search for Kazimir Urbanski, you're going to see people that have mentioned to Twitter support to call for my reinstatement, because they are aware that what I was banned for was a misinterpretation of what I was actually intending. So yeah. Bob Bear says, what will be the setting of baptism fire? The setting of baptism fire is going to be the Christianization of Poland. So it's the default starting date is 1025, and it's in the Piast dynasty kingdom of Poland. At the time when the first dynasty of Polish kings are trying to Christianize the entire nation, but there's still a lot of the nation is wild and savage and full of paganism and magic and witchcraft and monsters. Will Baptism of Fire have expanded reaction roll mechanics like Social Encounter? Well, it'll have the bare bones of that, yes. And it'll have a couple of examples for sure. It definitely is going to have like haggling mechanics in the trade part, like the haggling reaction rolls. And it'll probably have one or two others in the appendices. But it won't have all of the examples of Baptism of Fire, of the Silk Road Social Encounters book. Wiley Dudwick says, Pundit's perpetual pizza party, $20 a month. All right. Jonathan Reed says, very happy with the subscription model. I do a number of things like that. I mean, yeah, I could probably do it on Patreon. I mean, I've got a goddamn Patreon. I might as well use it for something, right? But I don't know. There's some people that seem a bit averse to Patreon for political reasons, you know. So I also don't want to do it somewhere where somebody will be like, well, oh, I'll never give money to them or whatever, you know. Richard says, I would like it, but I'd rather it was a podcast I would want to listen to while walking a dog. Well, I mean, most of my videos have no action in them. You can just listen to them as if they were a podcast, Rich. Like, you do realize that my channel is largely a glorified podcast. It's a video camera pointing at books that aren't moving. And unless the cat shows up, and unless it's a live stream like this, there's literally nothing to look at it. Even then, you know, apart from the cat, there's really no, like, you could just be listening to me talking right now, and there's nothing you need to look at on the camera. So I really don't understand how this isn't already a podcast. You know, maybe it's just about the app where it shows up in or something. I was in the Nerd Cognito? Was it Nerd Cognito? Yeah, I think it's Nerd Cognito podcast just before all this happened. And you know, they're an example of guys that are, I guess, on the influencer side, but that actually had to stood up for their principles. But of course, one of them is, I believe, Jewish, so that would probably be a big part of it. They kind of understood what was at stake in a different way than the rest of them did. Marshall Miller says, it kind of depends on the price point. At $10, I could go for it, even if I don't use it all. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing of a subscription model like this. There'd be some products that you might never use. I would hope that they'd still be at least interesting to read, right? But there would be some that might not be stuff that you'd use, but I would hope to vary it enough. And again, I would probably have a variety between, like, sometimes there might be stuff for Invisible College there, so modern stuff, future stuff, Star Adventure. There might be, you know, who knows what I might come up with at this point, right? Like, certainly there'll be a lot of Blind and Dragon stuff, but there's bound to be some other things too. And there's definitely going to be Gonzo stuff. Dark Mist says, I would like this. It's like a magazine. You make good stuff. Do it. Some female using RPGPundit has your username on Twitter. I checked for your name an hour ago, and this woman was, yeah, but my name was never on Twitter. My what do you call it? My tag was, like, my Twitter tag was at Casimir Urbanski, not RPGPundit. It was never RPGPundit as a tag, right? RPGPundit is, I was not aware that there was some woman that is using my name, but okay. Are you sure it's a woman and it's not just someone pretending to be a woman or some faker? You know, like, there have been a lot of fake RPGPundit accounts over the years, right? Of people that have been. Yeah, okay, yeah, I see what you mean. It's just a parody account. Like, there are lots of parody accounts, right? Remember, my account was verified. Incredibly, I still got permabanned, but there we are. They don't even take my being verified into account as a credibility thing. Paula Bear just says, why don't you do the Reconquista of Spain? Well, I might at some point. I just feel like doing Spain is kind of stepping on Aquelarre's toes. I'm not too sure I could do it better than Aquelarre. My name says, I like the RPG Pundit Presents mini books. That's perfect. I can buy whatever looks interesting. I'd be more willing to pay more than you're charging for those, by the way. Well, that's nice to know, my name. Yeah, of course, you can, when it's published like that in public, you can buy whatever you want, right? But the problem is there, I'd have to have somebody to put it up on drive-through or somewhere, and it just becomes, then I have to have a publisher, because I'm not going to do that work myself. I just don't. I will not do it. I'm a writer. I'm not a publisher, right? So if I'm going to do this and not have a middleman in between that may or may not end up being reliable, and where I could just get stuff out quickly to you, then I have to do it in this like format, Lord Southard says, well, they include Baltic states like Latvia and Lithuania. Well, neither of those really existed in the 1020s, but the Lithuanian tribes did, and they're mentioned in the book, right? They're not a central part of the story yet. The Commonwealth of Poland and Lithuania doesn't happen for like 3 more centuries after that, so that's well into the future. Right now, the Lithuanians are savage barbarians that are just past the fringes of Christian civilization. My name says, sometimes you go through, yes, my reviews. Okay, yes. In my reviews, there's something to look at in the camera. If I'm doing a video review, then it's not a podcast. Says, you cover a lot of medieval European history. What do you recommend for people? I never know what to recommend. I'm going to be honest with you. I never know what to recommend to people to learn, because I read books that are just like so obscure. I like I've largely forgotten where a lot of my basic knowledge of like the basic details of the Middle Ages comes from, because I've read literally thousands of history books and watch documentaries and other stuff too, right? And so it's very hard for me to like say, well, look, here's this simple book that will explain to you everything you need to know, right? Like there probably is a simple book, but I wouldn't know which one it is, right? Like, I mean, the books that I could recommend to you are usually going to be like obscure books about like, an obscure book about like saints that were actually just animals that came from like pagan survivalism or something like that, or a book about like the significance of the printing press in the context of the Reformation, so it's kind of hard for me to give a good recommendation for a book or books. I guess my books is what I would recommend, right, for starters. My name says, have you thought about doing anything in the Bronze Age? Yeah, I mean, possibly. I mean, yeah, okay. Technically, even Arrows of Indra isn't Bronze Age because it's just past Bronze Age. But yeah, I could do that. It's possible. I don't know yet. There's a very good chance that my next big project after Baptism of Fire will not be historical, or if it is, will be very, very different in some way, because I've been doing a lot of historical stuff. Yeah, no, exactly. I'm obsessed with the subject, so I don't remember where I learned most of anything. I could name authors that I absolutely love, like historians that I absolutely love, but none of them write basic books, right? Like Francis Yates is not a writer of basic books on like 17th century history, right? Like you need to look at a whole bunch of other stuff, right? I could certainly tell you to, like, look at the actual Robin Hood stories, look at the actual Arthurian legends, right? Look at those things for starters to give you some idea, Try to find any kind of good basic book on the War of the Roses. Like, I can't tell you which one is a good basic book, but as long as, look at the reviews, see if it says anything about intersectionality or feminism or some shit like that. And if it doesn't, or just get a good book on the War of the Roses from like the late 60s or the early 70s, anywhere up to like the 80s, basically. You're likely to get, it's likely to be okay to read, So, quite possibly. Somebody mentions A Distant Mirror by Barbara Tuchman. Yes. I mean, that it covers the whole, the peak of the Middle Ages, basically. And I don't remember when that was written, but it was written, like it was written probably before I was born, I think. So it's probably pretty good, actually. I don't remember if I've read that or not, actually. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, there's different, like, what you want to avoid, obviously, is any book that takes a very strong kind of Marxist perspective of saying, like, this was economic issues that were motivating whatever, or you want to also avoid, obviously, the intersectional and critical theory elements of it, right? That were, where you're supposed to get a history of the Middle Ages, and instead of like, learning about the basics of what medieval life was like, you're learning about like, oh, there was this black guy that was in the court of, he was in the court of Henry VI. Therefore, and the black people were, all over the place. It's just stuff like that, these sorts of distortions of history to suit present day agendas. I mean, that always happened in some ways or another, but now they're just ridiculous. Climbing the Mountain says we're way past Benji's bedtime. It's a whole new experience. Well, I'm generally more functional after Benji's bedtime. Project Gutenberg has histories and fictions that are regarding the War of the Roses. I'm sure they do. Yeah, that's a good idea. Kobanizer says, why go historical when magic and monsters change everything? How do you mean? In the real Middle Ages, there was magic and there was monsters. Day-to-day administration in the Holy Roman Empire. You know what? That is a topic that is completely outside my ballywick. Like, I mean, the only context of the Holy Roman Empire that has been like anywhere and a subject of my interest was in the context of, social history, religious studies, when I was specializing on the Reformation, right? But even there, it's just stuff that happened in the Holy Roman Empire. It wasn't really stuff that I needed to know a lot about the Holy Roman Empire's administration to handle. I think I've actually been learning more about the very early period of the Holy Roman Empire in writing Baptism of Fire than I ever did know before, because I had to do a lot of research on that too, because of course it's intricately connected to the creation of the Polish crown. Real Crusades History YouTube channel. Well, that sounds like something to check out. Right. Well, in any case, I think I can say a couple of things. First, I've never quite managed to light this pipe in 3 goddamn hours. That's the problem when I'm like constantly talking, so it's constantly going out, right? But you'd think I'd be able to get it like a bit better than I have been. And the second is that we've covered a great deal of ground. I think it sounds like at least a couple of people that answered. I'd love to hear more opinions on this, but the couple of people that answered think that the subscriber model could be something that works. And so I'm going to keep thinking about it. I'm not ready to do it one way or the other yet. What I am ready to do now is I'm ready to do more community posts on YouTube. And I'm ready to do more live streams more often than just every 1,000 subscribers. There goes Meatball. Hey, behave yourself, Meatball. Meatball. Do not misbehave. God damn it, Meatball. And she's going to try to sit on that router, and then that's going to be the end of the live stream. If the internet cuts out, I'm not coming back. I'll let you know. So yeah, like I'm willing to do more live streams. I might do more frequent videos because hell, I've got a lot more time on my hand without being on Twitter, you know. Nicholas Taylor says, honestly, I'm on the fence about it. I only ever bought your books to begin with, not the RPG Pundit Presents stuff. I'm probably missing out on quite a bit. Well, you know, if you've bought the Medieval Authentic Companion 1 and 2, and you bought World of the Last Sun and the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, you now have a significant percentage of the RPG Pundit Presents material, right? Which is the other thing that would happen, is that I would do this thing for subscribers, and I'm sure that eventually, when I had, 100 issues or whatever, I'd end up going to a publisher and saying, do you want to publish these 50 issues or these 25 issues of the new Pundit Pizza Party? We'll call it that for the moment. The Pundit Pizza Party magazine. Do you want to publish this as a book, right? And they'll publish it as a book, and then everybody will be able to get it, right? Sam A says, a suggestion for a subscriber, could we see one for free? I think people would be able to answer better. Well, I mean, again, they're going to be probably just like the RPG Pundit Presents books, but yeah, maybe I'll post. Maybe what I'll do is I'll post a couple of them for free if once I get it going, right? Like if people have their doubts, and like by the time I'm, I don't know, on the 4th or 5th month, I can put out the for free the second or third one I do or whatever, some good one probably. But the point is also it's going to have the topics are going to vary a lot from one issue to the other, so that there's a lot of variety there. So it's going to be general OSR subjects. Yeah. Well, I'll keep thinking about it. We can keep talking about it. Share your ideas with me. Let me know. Now you also know where to get in touch with me. Check out the rpgsite.com. Go to Mewe and check out the Inglorious OSR. You won't be disappointed if you buy into it. Or if you're not willing to be on any of those, if you happen to be on Facebook, then please, on Facebook, check out facebook.com/rpgpundit. That is my Facebook page, and subscribe to that page, right? And that way you can keep in touch with me in other ways than just on YouTube, okay? If you were formerly in touch with me on Twitter and we can't be sure I'm coming back, have those other means, have those other ways to get in touch. All right. So I guess I'm about ready to finish. The Jim says, have you ever found yourself tempted to write adventures that parody the road crap just to say I did it better? I've been tempted to run Radiant Citadels that Dystopia Radiant. Well, I did that actually in a recent Last Sun DCC adventure. So like you could probably, I'm pretty sure that's on Bill the Elf's channel. I've literally done that. And if I was still doing RPG Pundit Presents, I'd probably have an issue called the Transplanar Crystal Spire. That might be an issue that'll show up in my subscriber thing, right? Like that might be the new deal, right? So you might find new material from my DCC campaign popping up in the Pundit Pizza Party issues, as we're calling it now. Jeez, I hope that doesn't end up sticking as the real name, but that's funny anyway. Patrick Burns says the Holy Roman Empire is not only responsible for the Reformation, but is also responsible for the Great Schism. Well, the Holy Roman Empire was responsible for the printing press being responsible for the success of the Reformation, because otherwise it doesn't matter who supported Luther, it wouldn't have succeeded. It was a question of the technology overriding the time, the institutions, which is what people in power today are terrified of, right? Like one of the reasons that there's all of this insanity online is that the traditional establishment of power for the last 50 or 60 years sees itself enormously threatened. They used to be able to control the news. They can't control the news anymore because people go to Twitter for the news, right? Because a guy with a YouTube could end up having 1 million more views than CNN does, So like, that is the same thing. The technology ran away with the institution's traditional infrastructure of power, because suddenly there were ways to get around that infrastructure of power. And that's what allowed the Reformation to happen. That's what's going to allow whatever the hell is going to happen next here to happen next here, in a way that is going to be probably 20 times more world-altering than the Reformation was. Because, like, who knows what's going to come out of the internet world, right? As for the schism, well, partly it was the Holy Roman Empire. I mean, partly it was almost an inevitability, right? That there was a political reason, and there was also a theological reason, right? Like that the Nicene Creed was the reason for the first part of the schism between Latin and Byzantine civilizations, right? And so if you're a believer in the Nicene Creed, then that's part of why you're split with the Orthodox. And of course, it's much more complicated than that. There are many more reasons besides that. But that also wasn't alone the responsibility of the success of Islam. Islam was already succeeding at the time that happened, right? Remember, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was burnt down by the Fatimids before the Nicene Creed became an established part of the Latin Mass. So you got to watch the order of history there. All right, guys, I really appreciate everybody who's been on here. I appreciate the people who've already gone and joined the OSRHQ. I hope you've also added the RPG Pundits page to following it. I just post updates there and stuff. I'm not super meticulous poster there, but it'll be really helpful if you want to keep track of me. My name says, would you be willing to use content for other producers in your subscription plan? Well, do you mean like guest writers and stuff like that? I guess maybe. Yeah, it's possible. I don't know how I would work that out with the people that are doing it, unless they're just volunteering or something, but perhaps, right? Or, maybe I don't plan to start my own Patreon, if that's what you mean. I'm not planning on something like that, but I don't know. There's something there that I'm working on, trying to figure out how to make this work, right? But Mining says, I think Twitter Files is pretty clearly controlled. That Twitter Files shows Twitter is pretty clearly controlled. No, well, yes and no. That was happening only because Twitter was out of control, and they never got it fully into control, right? They couldn't ban enough people. They without shutting down Twitter and then shutting down all social media and shutting down the internet, you can't escape the freedom of speech that emerges from the internet, right? And so that ruins their ability to control the narrative, no matter how much they tried. And the more they tried, the more fake it looked, right? The more it looked like hypernormalization, the more artificial it was, the more that it was very clearly them lying to you. And they know that you know that they're lying to you, but that they're just saying that if they're threatening you, that you have to pretend to believe this thing that you know is a lie, because otherwise they're going to try to cancel you, right? And that is not the same as the control they used to have. The control they used to have is that they would say something and you'd fucking believe it, even though it wasn't true. And now they can't do that anymore because you don't believe it, and they know you're never going to believe it. So all they can do is force you to pretend to believe it at best. That's the difference. And that's something they're never coming back from. That's never going to change again, All right. Well, thank you again to everyone. And again, if you like this live stream, then please subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, check out all my products. I don't have super chats here, but if you want to support me, you want to thank me for this 3-hour live stream I did, go buy an RPG Pundit Presents book or buy one of my other books if you've got a bit more money and you're looking for great products. If you've already bought all my stuff, you can subscribe to me on Patreon. I don't have anything there. This isn't the subscriber we've been talking about yet. Maybe I'll end up using Patreon for it. Maybe not. I don't know. But right now, if you just want to, throw me a few bucks every month in exchange for the content as a tip for the content I make, You can go to Patreon and give me that there, or you can buy my products. And please, absolutely share my YouTube videos on Twitter. Make sure that even if I've been silenced, the videos won't be, right? Make sure that the message still gets out. So that's how we do it. All right, guys, I really appreciate it. We're at the 3-hour mark, and still currently smoking the damn pipe I started with, which is a Lorenzetti egg. By the way, Lorenzetti, I've heard, is going out of business. Somebody told me this. I'm shocked. It is one of my favorite pipe brands, you know, and like they make incredible pipes, and I can't believe that they're gone. You know, like I have more Lorenzettis, I think, than any other pipe. So anyways, Lorenzetti egg and Samuel Gowith Balkan Flake. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much.